This match is now officially a Judy Bagwell on a forklift match.
Broken, thankless, push you down, open.
Hello and welcome to On a Forklift. Now, it's been a minute since I've done one of these, and I'm very excited for this one, and that's why you're getting it before we come back from the holiday break. To me, this is something I've been waiting for a long time. I love doing interviews. To rip the Band-Aid off, I'm the Hoochie Daddy Ethan James. You can find me at Hoochie Daddy EJ on Instagram. That's not the point of why we're here tonight. I cannot wait to bring my guest on, so please welcome me in joining professional wrestling's Swiss Army knife, John Bullard.
Hey, Ethan, it's really good to be on the show. I've been looking forward to it. Huge fan of your podcasts. The guys are always doing some awesome work. So thank you so much for having me on.
Thank you for joining us. This is, to us, to know that somebody outside of our local reach has noticed the product, has taken notice of it. That's the biggest honor that can be bestowed upon us, is that we've gotten to the point where we're outside of that Metro Detroit bubble. So for that, I thank you greatly.
Oh, most welcome.
But let's kind of get into this. So I don't like doing the usual what got you into wrestling. That's not my line of questioning. Every
podcast does that. Like, so what made you become a wrestler? And it's like wrestling.
Yeah. I mean, like, I just judging by where, what you've done in the past, how long you've been around, we can all go, oh yeah, well, he probably watched Hogan in the late 80s and early 90s. And like, he was the, say your prayers and take your vitamins thing. But
believe it or not, though, I was actually a Dusty Rhodes kid watching NWA on 6:05 Eastern time.
I was
the South.
I was a Goldust kid. I was a Goldust kid. Goldust and Sting. That's what made me. We go into try not to make this about myself, but really quickly, you go into wrestling training and they ask you what inspired you, and they come around to me, and I've got and Truth is there, and he goes, well, what inspired you to get into wrestling? Who are your inspirations? And I said, Sting, Goldust, Eddie Guerrero. And he goes, Goldust? And I was like, I was a weird kid. I loved people with face paint. So it was LOD, Goldust, everything. That's how I got into it. Also, he has the best power slam. Just one of those like little niche things that you find out. But enough about that. Let's break down some of these accolades, but I don't want to do them in the way of we're just going to list them down. You've been play-by-play. You've been color commentary. You've been a wrestler. You've been a manager. You're a promoter. And now you're breaking into the world of international wrestling. So not only things here in the States, I want to get right into a big event that has taken place for you. Let's talk about BJW and how that came to be, because I don't have a lot of history with BJW. My history with like deathmatch in Japan is like FMW, and the Onita stuff.
The Wing and IWA Japan, all the good stuff. Oh
yeah, All Japan, things like that. That's about the extent of it. So I don't have a lot of history on Big Japan, but I got to watch a little bit of your product, and may I say, sir, absolutely fantastic. It's riveting. I enjoy it, but I want to know how that came about to you.
Well, long story short, I've always been a fan of wrestling in general, but being in the wrestling business, kind of have to go a little further back to make the story understandable. So
Tarantino it. Let's
kind of Pulp Fiction style. But I was a kid growing up in the South, grew up watching the NWA. But by the time the 90s happened, ECW became like part of my life, like a huge hardcore ECW fan. And I went to all the Fort Lauderdale War Memorial shows growing up. And so going to all the Florida events. And a lot of times when you go to these events, you would actually see like the tape traders would have their own vendor tables. And one of the tape traders, by the time it was around 1999, I saw Big Japan Pro Wrestling being aired on this monitor, and I was seeing like the barbed wire and then the light tubes and all this other stuff, and I'm like, okay, I've seen hardcore, but this is like a different level. And they had the scaffolding with the barbed wire trampoline type thing where it's like you fall into and it bounces back up.
Mhm.
We don't see that in America at all. So it was like mind blowing seeing this. And I was hooked. So I started following Big Japan ever since the 90s and always follow the product, very familiar with it. A lot of people think Big Japan is only deathmatch wrestling, but Big Japan also had and still does have amazing heavyweight strong style division. The junior heavyweights, Yoshihiro Tajiri actually had the first big break in Big Japan. That was one of the first companies that showcased Tajiri's ability before the WWE or before ECW even picked him up. So I was a big fan of it. Now, this year, I started getting booked a lot overseas. And one of the things I started thinking about is, you know what? I've had previous experience working with the Japanese, but I never had the experience of actually being a voice for one of their companies or being someone that people become more familiar with. I was always a behind the scenes type of guy. So I actually reached out to the office. And one of the things I always want to teach my students and guys that follow me or people I mentor to is you have to learn sometimes not to look for the job opportunity, but to create the job opportunity that you want. And when I saw here's this great product, but there's no English commentary for it. And I've noticed that a lot of deathmatch fans watches it, but some of them who are new to the product may not know, who is Ishikawa or who is Dice Sekimoto, who is Ito, all these other guys. So they're not familiar with them. Well, as a longtime fan and longtime supporter of the product, and someone who's also involved in the wrestling business, it's my job to be the educator. Let me give you a little backstory of who these guys are and why they're having this match, why this is historical, why this crazy contraption is being built, all these different things. So when I brought it to the office, I said, look, I want to be your English commentator. This is my background. Here's my resume. Here's my video work. These are my references of people who I worked with over the years. And I stayed in contact with the owner of the company, the president of the company. And after about 2 months of talking, he gave me the job. He's like, you're dedicated to us. You're professional. And we see that, you're not here just to get the rub of saying you're working with the Japanese, but you really want to be part of our family. So welcome aboard.
And that's a huge cultural thing too, because the respect, it's earned respect. There's not, and I don't mean to knock on the North American scene, but that doesn't really exist here because it's not seen as such wrestling's a zeitgeist in the Japanese culture. And so to be part of that, to be involved, I mean, you hear the stories about like the dojo and a gaijin goes over and they're sweeping and they're sleeping on the floor and they're eating the bare minimum and they're doing this and they're doing that, all to gain the respect of everything. So that's immense that you were able to maintain that. But you did it the right way. You did it the respectful way. You maintained the contact. You showed the interest. You appreciated the product. And that's phenomenal. And I think you got brought in at a great time too. You've got this big show with the Baka Gaijin crew going over there. So it's an excellent moment for a crossover.
Right
You've
now,
got these legends. Sorry.
No. Don't ever have to apologize. It is your show. Right now, though, in my opinion, it's like a new era of Big Japan that's starting to brew. Like there's been different eras of Big Japan. This is like a new era that's about to start, where we're now seeing the new influx of not only the old school deathmatch legends coming back to Japan, but now you got guys like Akira, Satu Jin, Zeke from Australia, who's an amazing junior heavyweight. You have Project Havoc, that are an amazing group of gaijin wrestlers, not only from the United States, but we also have like Leighton Buzzard from the United Kingdom. You have talent from Mexico and other places coming in, and it's like this new era for Big Japan where they're showcasing the best of all styles. It's not just an amazing combat sport like deathmatch feel, but you're also getting the best of the Japanese strong style. You're getting different junior heavyweights that are not just high flyers, but also mat technicians. You're getting guys that could do lucha libre and different styles. And it's an exciting, is it really is to me, probably one of the most exciting eras for the company. And I'm really excited to call the action. And also I work in public relations for them as well too. I'm their English public relations. So I do interviews with Gaijin talent to educate Japanese fans on who they are. As you see, some of my posts are done in English and in Japanese.
Mhm.
So it's a way to showing the fans, like, you may not know who this guy is now,
I appreciate it.
but let me show you who they're going to be and why it's important to know who they are.
That's how I had to break in with the New Japan Wrestling. So you talk about tape traders, you talk about Tampa. We had something here. It was called Gibraltar Trade Center. It was like a giant indoor flea market, but there were guys that had permanent booths. So when you'd have a permanent booth, you could go and you could get tape trader. And there's one guy, and all he did was like bootleg DVDs, and then he did like bootleg concert DVDs, and then he did wrestling tape trading. And so that's how I got a hold of a lot of stuff from back in the day. As a kid, I watched a lot of like Smoky Mountain, Jim Crockett Promotions, AWA, things like that. I had family that lived in Eastern Tennessee, and they would get a hold of the tapes. That's how I watched a lot of this stuff. But I didn't have that access to New Japan. So Gibraltar Trade Center was my access to like FMW and New Japan and things like that. And that's actually how I learned like why Scott Norton was a big deal. Because when he was in the NWO, I'm like, why is he a big deal? But then you have the NWO Japan, and I'm like, okay, so I got to like piece the stuff together, and you're like, okay, this is why this is a big deal. But WCW was horrible about telling you why somebody was a big deal. Early on, they were good about it, but
one of the big reasons why guys like Mike Tenay and Joey Styles was such a huge influence on me as a commentator was the knowledge of the wrestlers that they would talk about. Like Joey Styles, you always see when a guy come down from the entrance, like Johnny Smith from All Japan Pro Wrestling, he would say straight up everything about Johnny Smith. Like Johnny Smith is pound for pound one of the best British technical wrestlers. You know, he comes from the dungeon. He has that legitimacy with like the Billy Robinsons of the world, and you know the Davey Boy Smiths and those type of guys. And instantly that credibility is right there just by hearing that from the commentator, letting you know the importance of this person. And I try to do the same thing with all my shows. You saw, you know, I sent you commentary of some of my work, and or work in my commentary, I should say. It's one of the things that myself and my broadcast partner Peapod take pride in, is that we want to educate our fans. We want the fans to know why Masashi Takeda and Akira is a big deal, because it's a dream match that so many deathmatch fans and also just Japanese wrestling fans have been looking forward to it, because the Crazy Boy versus, you know, the Death Fighter it was a match that people for the last 2.5 years have been craving. Big Japan delivered it.
It was, in what I enjoyed about it, especially in your styles, to pull this back a little bit, is that I sat in there and I knew who Akira was. And I'm not super familiar with Takeda, but I know who Crazy Boy is. Like, I've like my introduction to actual like deathmatch wrestling was really, this year's been a crash course. Like I'm taking, you know, it's night class at a community college, and they're just shoving my brain full of it in like 8 weeks. So that's what I've learned about it. But when I sit down and I listen to the commentary that yourself and Peapod did, it gave me, even though knowing who Akira was, I learned things. Knowing a little bit about Takeda, I learned things, and I enjoyed it because everything fit. Everything was cohesive, and it told a story in the match as well. It didn't feel disjointed. It didn't feel like it was being forced down my throat, but it gave credence as to why can they do this? Why is Akira such a good hybrid wrestler? Okay, so Takeda can also go with that too.
Yeah. He's an amateur wrestler and also an MMA fighter.
And that's actually how I knew.
And an impressive record on top of that.
That's actually how I knew Takeda, is not as a wrestler, but it was through the MMA scene. I have a friend who's very big into it, talks about it a lot. So you speak about the Japanese strong style, and I wanted to kind of move on to that a little bit, because you feel like somebody who can give a really good explanation to the viewers on this channel, because I'm not so great at this, the difference between King's Road and Japanese strong style, because there is a difference.
Big difference. So the biggest misnomer about strong style is everyone thinks it means go out there and shoot headbutt someone as hard as you can, or is about beating the living hell out of someone. And here's a part that people overlook. The word strong style is actually a terminology for underdog. It's fighting spirit. It means no matter how bad you're getting beat up on, you're never giving up. You're constantly trying to fight from underneath. You're constantly trying to kick out. You're constantly trying to not tap out from a submission hold. You see like the wrestlers like dig into the mat and they're crawling, pulling themselves to it, but yet they're screaming. They're showing the pain, but it's the expression of I'm not giving up. When they finally do give up or they pass, it's all about. And the thing is, that's a Japanese mentality. Japanese people will tell you straight up they're resilient because look at all the catastrophes they dealt with. You know, from the atomic bomb being dropped on Hiroshima and Nagasaki, the earthquakes, the tsunamis, the feudal era of Japan. They're resilient people. They still stand together as a country, and they will always have that honor code, the Bushido code. Still to this day, there's probably some of the greatest people I ever dealt with because they're honorable. And that's part of their mentality too, is we never give up. Fighting spirit. That's not a wrestling terminology. That's a Japanese mentality. And to see that, that's what a lot of Americans get blindsided by. They think strong style is just go out there and just drop someone on their head, and it's not. It's that mentality of you're going to fight from underneath. Prime example of strong style knowledge. You watch Big Van Vader when he was wrestling. A lot of times when the count of three, if he's going to get pinned, even at three, he's still kicked out. Even though he's going to take the loss, he still kicks out. Why? I still have fighting spirit in me. You know, you beat me, but I'm not done yet. You know, just that close. But I want to come back again and fight you again. You know, that's
it lends credence to why it's going to continue. It doesn't, you know, it feels like, hey, this guy got a victory, but it also builds the other person as well. You end up with a situation where it's like, okay, they beat him, but man, was it close. Like, that guy's tough. You don't have somebody just lame ducking it out there after they get pinned.
The best way I can explain the difference between Strong Style and King's Road. King's Road is more like old school 1980s NWA, where there's more storytelling. It's more slower pace, but not slower like I want to fall asleep watching this, but slower pace like we're going to let everything register why this is happening.
Everything has a purpose, no wasted movement.
Every little nook and cranny has a reason why it's happening. You look at Tsuruta, Jumbo. He probably had maybe 8, 9 really good moves, but if you ever really watch it though, those 9 moves mattered. Every little thing that he did, the kitchen sink, that drop kick, the high knee, anything that he did registered with the crowd why it was done. You go back and watch Stan Hansen versus Misawa, you know. And the thing about King's Road too, and I'm a huge King's Road fan. The thing about King's Road too is that some matches, definitely like a feud, let's say we're building up Hansen versus Misawa, or definitely Hansen versus Kobashi. Kobashi in his first year took 75 losses in a row. Now, most people think, man, they're just jobbing this guy out. What they don't understand is every single match, he went from being squashed to now he's fighting. This happened, now he's fighting. And it's a build-up. When he finally got the first big win, that was a huge deal to not only Kobashi, but it was a huge deal to the Japanese fans. Because now you're building up that fighting spirit, but they're doing it in more of an old school style, where Strong Style kind of more of a martial arts type aspect to it, where King's Road is more of let's tell a story. And you could have a big finisher. Stan Hansen hits you with the lariat once, 1, 2, 3. You're done. But now a couple of matches later, it takes 2 big lariats to put you down. And then now the third time, now he has to really try to go out there and kill you because now you're building up to, I know it's coming and I'm prepared for it.
There's a match that happened this year, and it was here, and it was a main product, and it was Cody Rhodes and Brock Lesnar at SummerSlam. And like, that's what I tell people. I'm like, that's King's Road Wrestling. Now it's a microcosm because it was a one-off match. I mean, the build and the rivalry and stuff really wasn't there. And obviously Cody's a well-established talent, you know, Brock's well-established, little different story than having to build a guy. But that's a situation where I push them to. I do just very quickly, we talked about Peapod. I do want to bring up an image here. That's you guys at RPW. So
and also
shout out
Christian Barajas, who is behind us, who's an amazing ring announcer.
It's anytime a ring announcer has just a baller suit on, you know it's going to be good, especially if it's fitted. Like No knock to certain guys around here that are good ring announcers, but
Yeah.
you become a great ring announcer when you dress like a great ring announcer.
Yes, and he's very good. He's got a velvet voice. He's really, really good.
That is fantastic. So I want to peel away a little bit from Japan, and let's work our way back here, because what I brought up on screen there had the letters RPW. Now, Chris Kohlenberg has been on here before. He's been
Chris.
We did I believe we did a preview show for the show in Maybe. Yeah, we did a preview show on our channel for that, and it was good time. Enjoyed it. I did not get a chance to get to the show, but I saw videos, everything from it. I think there was a trampoline there, like we were talking about earlier.
Yes.
So there was a barbed wire trampoline at that. That's the only time I've seen that here in the States as well. So working here, obviously you're essentially on the other side of the state from where we're at. How did you get tied into the RPW thing? Was that because they do the shows in Chicagoland?
So, funny thing about how I fell into deathmatch wrestling, I'm actually an old school traditional wrestling wrestler and also commentator. So, even though I've always respected hardcore wrestling, that was never really my field at first. This year, I kind of fell into like the rabbit hole, and it's kind of like, okay, I never thought I would do this, but let's do it. And I fell in love with the whole community that came about it. But so how that all happened was I became really good friends with Chris at RPW, and they were first going into trying to run into Chicago.
Mm-hmm.
And myself and Chris brought deathmatch wrestling to Chicago. We're the two guys that reason why deathmatch wrestling even showed up in the state of Illinois again. Definitely for Berwyn, which was a first time ever.
The legendary Berwyn Eagles Club, by the way.
When we say famous, it is a famous landmark of wrestling.
RPW, BLP, all of the places that run out that have run out.
But not only that, like AAW, Shimmer for all the women, and half these women who are now like main eventers at WrestleMania have worked in Berwyn Eagles. And Bryan Danielson wrestled in Berwyn, and I can go on CM Punk and so many others. So we were the first group of companies that actually brought deathmatch wrestling to the Berwyn Eagles Club. And so beforehand, I was just helping him just get things promoted. I wasn't trying to get on the show or nothing. And one of their original commentators had a leave of absence, and he couldn't make the shows. So
right place, right time.
It's fate. It's really, that's the best way to say it was fate. And sure enough, Chris messaged me, "Hey, you're a commentator?" I was like, "Yeah." He's like, "Well, one of our commentators are out. Do you mind filling in for him?" And that was my whole thing. I was just filling in. Yeah, I didn't think I was going to a full-time job. And I was like, you know what? I've always wanted to commentate a deathmatch show, just to have it on that resume, say I've done it. So yeah, let's do this. And pretty much the rest is history. I got the chance to work with Peapod, and very first night, calling a match with him, and it was natural chemistry. It's the reason why with Big Japan, when I got the chance to select someone to actually do commentary with, that was my natural selection, because he's good, and he's good at his job, and he's knowledgeable.
Trademark Charlotte Flair.
Yeah. When I have to pay, tip my hat and pay her fee.
It's okay. We're not live right now. We can just. What did you say? Oh no! And honestly, it's fate falling into place. I mean, that's how we got involved with Horror Slam. Like we were contacted by the owners of Horror Slam. They said, "Hey, we have a guy who can't get to the show. We really want to air it. We want to make sure that he can see it at his sister's house." Yada yada. Well, it turns out that gentleman was Piss Jug Mike. And so that's how our first show was going. They were like, "Hey, can you guys do this?" And we said, "We don't know, but we'll try." And we had a webcam, and I was on StreamYard on my cell phone with a selfie stick duct taped, and I'm running around the ring. I was picking glass out of my beard for a week after that. Of course, I end up, and I like I said, crash course into it. The first main event I ever filmed was the Duke versus Schlack. So
trial by fire, my guy.
Right, I got front row seats. Well, listen, I also got Madman Pondo versus Hardcore Hillbilly. So let's pump the brakes on how great the show was. I love Pondo. He came and sat with us, did commentary on the show that night. It was really cool. But just if you ever get a chance, there's a spot on Botchamania. Go check it out. It's got Sven the reindeer. That
middle rope. Yeah,
yeah, that
I feel
was
bad for Pondo on that one. I'm so glad
yeah.
he's taking care of his health and everything.
He's
He
doing
looks tremendous.
fantastic.
Yeah.
He's on his 3rd Japan tour this year. Just speaking of deathmatch legends, the guy's out there and just absolutely killing it. But we're talking about the Berwyn Eagles Club. We're talking about Chicagoland. This is where you come into play because you, sir, were the proprietor of one CCW, Chicagoland Championship Wrestling. But recently you've gone through a bit of a rebranding.
Yeah.
So I wanted to ask about Chaotic Combat Wrestling.
It was a matter of time. So originally, Chicagoland Championship Wrestling, how that started was actually to help a friend who was battling through cancer. And it was, long story short, around 2014, I left the business. I had my retirement. And when I left, I mean, I left. I didn't go to any shows. I kind of lived a kind of a reclusive life and kind of kept to myself. People actually, when they come over to the house, didn't know I was in wrestling. I didn't have none of my memorabilia, none of my event posters, anything. I kind of kept quiet about it. It wasn't like I was ashamed of it. It was just kind of like sometimes when you want to be,
You just tone it down.
When you kind of walk away from something, you kind of like don't want to get pulled back in at the time. But a good friend of mine, talk about tape traders, a good friend of mine, Tony Myers, shout out to Tony, better known as Chainsaw Tony, and FMWE, the guy who wrestles Onita as the new Leatherface. Tony Myers and me goes way back for over 20 years. And Tony messaged me. He said, "Hey, you're in Chicago area now, right?" I'm like, "Yeah." And he's like, "Man, I got a good friend named Gravestone. You need to hit him up because like he wants to get in wrestling, but I'm not that close around him to like kind of guide him. But you're in that area now. Be good for you to talk to him because he wants to be a referee." Cool. Okay. Didn't think nothing of it, but Tony's like a lifelong best friend. So like, hey, when your best friend asks you for something, you help out your best friend. So Tony introduced me to a guy by the name of Christopher Martinez. And Chris always went by Gravestone because of his metal band that he played in. And sure enough, Chris was like, "Yeah, I want to be a referee and want to get this done." I'm like, "Okay, cool." So every night he would give me a call when we would go and we would do like a Facebook Zoom video and we would watch a match and I would break down stuff to him and critique it and explain to him why this looked good, why this didn't. Study the legends like Earl Hebner and other guys who do a great job. And I was like, "This is what you want to do." Well, sure enough, a couple of months passed by. This is now around 2017 going into 2018. "Hey, I have a question for you." So what's that? And he said, "We got a wrestling show coming up in Halstead. They need a referee." I said, "Well, that's great, Chris. They got you, right?" "Yeah, they got me." "Okay. What do you need me for?" "Well, they need another referee." And it's, I was like, no. I was like, no. And I fought him on this. I was like, "Chris, I'm retired. No." Sure enough, he kept on, "Oh, well, I'll talk to the owner." I'm like, "You don't talk to anybody." "No." Sure enough, get a phone call. "Hey, by the way, we got a referee jersey for you now and everything. You still got your slacks and your shoes?" I'm like, yeah, I do.
You're still muttering under your breath and you're just
still no. And sure enough, he just drops it. "Come on, man. It's the one time I get the chance to actually get to work with you." And I was like, okay, I made this promise to myself, which I broke. And I was like, this is a one time only. I'll show up, I do this, and I'll give you back that jersey at the end of the night, and I'm walking away. "Okay, cool. Let's do this." Show up, and instantly walk into this building, and I'm like, okay, shake everyone's hand. "Nice to meet you." Sit down with Chris, went over the matches and stuff. I refereed a match, and remember, 2014 to 2018, I've been away this long. Didn't even touch a ring. And I was like, okay, I want to see how bad my cardio is tonight. And somehow my cardio was really good. And did a gauntlet match and 2 other matches, time and wise, like almost 2 hours by myself. So I was like, all right, doing good. I'm going to retire after this because I'm going to wake up in the worst pain in the world, but feeling good about myself. Yeah, go me. So sure enough, and the show's over with. And I take my jersey right off, hand it to the promoter. "Thank you, sir. I will, you guys enjoy and have a good night." By the time I walked out, the promoter's like, "By the way, your wife told me all about your history, man. Why didn't you tell us that you have like all these accolades and all this other stuff?" And I was like, I don't hype myself up. I was like, that's not me. And my wife is like, here's all the DVD. My wife pulls all these DVDs out, and my wife's a huge supporter of me. But God bless her, she's the sweetest girl in the world. She's like, here's all of his DVDs. Check out all these guys who worked with him, and Vader's on this show, and this guy and this guy, and and BJ Whitmer. And I'm just like, crap. I'm just like, okay. So sure enough, I get a call. Hey man, we got a new company starting up. We would love to have you come work for us. Sure. And I knew right then, I'm never getting out.
You're
now,
never going back.
Long story short, how the whole Chicagoland thing come about, Chris at the show was constantly complaining about his back hurting. So I don't know what it is, but my back's killing me. I was like, well, maybe go see a doctor. Maybe you might have pulled a muscle. Maybe, find out what's going on. Sure enough, 2 weeks go by. I get a phone call from him. Well, and this is the type of guy that Chris was. Well, I got good news and bad news. And I was like, well, what's the bad news? Well, I got stage 4 cancer. I was like, and instantly I'm devastated by this. I'm like, man, no, And he's like, and this is the weird, this is that when you have a friend that has like a sense of, very sick sense of humor.
Mm-hmm.
And also, and Chris is one of those guys because he was a Buddhist. So he looked at life as a big opening instead of just, oh, it's the end. He's like, nope, there's going to be more. And he's like, the good news is I actually know what's wrong with my back. And I started laughing like, yeah. So he was going through chemotherapy. And this guy, why I have the positivity I have in my life, this guy never complained, not one day, about having cancer. Not one day he ever complained about that he may never walk again. He may never referee again. He may never do anything that he liked again. But every day he woke up positive. He was an amazing artist. So he would wake up and he would paint. He would draw. He would create magazine covers for pulp magazine companies. This guy was also a well-known comic book artist in the independent scene. So he was really respected. And every day he would create something. And I would ask him, like, it's amazing that you got this drive, that you're not letting this beat you. And he's like, nope. He's like, dude, I'm going to live my life to the end. And so when he would go through his chemotherapy rounds, we would just talk on the phone. And I decided one day to do something that one of my mentors did to me when I was on car rides. Was play guest booker. Good way to keep your mind fresh, keep your mind sharp. You're learning to be creative. And then on top of that, you're keeping your mind off of what's going on. Mm-hmm. And sure enough, we play guest booker. So we created the company, Chicagoland Championship Wrestling. It's going to be an old-time wrestling studio show. And we created like all the old Memphis territory stuff, but in the Midwest. That's how it came about. And so I talked to him. I was like, you know what? I want to actually create this company for you, Chris, and we're going to do this together. And sure enough, created the company. And 2020, we're supposed to have our debut show. And then COVID-19 happens. Shuts the world down. During that time shutting down, Chris lost his battle to cancer. So October comes rolling by. And so we did the big debut show for Chris. And of course, you go on Amazon Prime and still watch the show. And the first thing we did is we didn't do the 10-bell salute for Chris. I have the thing where I'm a huge fan of soccer and also European sports. And a lot of times when someone passes away or someone retires, they have this thing where they actually make the entire stadium stand up and give them a standing ovation. Every wrestler wants one thing. The standing ovation means so much to a wrestler.
Mm-hmm.
So what we did, we made the fans stand up and gave them a standing ovation as we ring announced them to heaven. That's what we did. So now the change of Chaotic Combat, I felt like when I took my hiatus from wrestling for a short while, and I can talk about that a little bit because I'm not afraid I think it might help inspire someone.
Was this real quick? Was this the Saturday Night Grapple Masters?
Certainly was.
All right. Well, perfect. We're going to get a link up to that right now.
Appreciate that.
Throw that up here. So continue. Sorry about that. I just wanted to make sure that gets its due diligence.
No, I appreciate that. So 2 years ago, a really awesome guy who passed away, Jeff Greeno, he was younger than I am. And he had 2 strokes. He had a heart attack and everything. And just a tragic life for someone to die so young. And it got me kind of kind of spooked because I was like, Jeff was in far better shape than I was, and this is how he goes. Like, this is not cool. So, in a panic, I decided to get a hold of my doctor and like, you know what? I kind of want to get my heart checked out and make sure, I'm okay. Because if Jeff went out, I need to make sure I'm going to be okay. So, went through a series of tests, and there's I think about 8 tests in total. 7 out of 8, I passed with flying colors. Now, it was the last test, which was actually like the EKG, where they do like the whole like scope of your heart and the whole, is the thing that saved my life. They actually found out that I had heart failure, and they were like, "Yeah, you." And it's the weirdest thing when I get the message. It's like, by the way, here's your test results, and I look at the results, and I'm seeing like all these, and I'm like, oh, that doesn't look good. And then it's like, yeah, you got a valve is only working at 20%. You got all this other stuff going on.
Not the news you want to find out on like a Tuesday night, and you got to go to work the next day.
Especially, and especially when you work graveyard shift, and it's like,
and you're alone and just with your thoughts,
for 12 hours a day, So I come in and they tell me, they're like, yeah, you got stage C heart failure, and the first thing they literally say to me, do you have a will or a power of attorney or anything like that written out? And you think about this, man, like at that age, like, and you hear that news, that's like, wow, is there like a fighting chance for this? Like,
like, wait a shot. Yeah, I have heart failure. Don't tell me, like, let's soften the blow a little bit here.
Yeah, and the thing is, like, I didn't shed a tear over it. I was just kind of like, okay. My wife, on the other hand, is just devastated by this.
Understandable.
And very much so. But weird me is like, okay, like, I'm still going to go live my life to the fullest, and I'm not going to let this beat me. So go through this whole. I took literally a whole time off from wrestling, and some people I talked to about it openly, and some people kind of kept on the down low because I didn't want to freak people out. And then people started kind of like wondering more and more about me, like, well, that's kind of strange. You're like running these shows and you got all this going, all of a sudden you just stop. And I kind of had to break it to the world. I was like, well, if you want to know, my heart's failing. Best thing that happened to me though was I had a brand new heart surgeon specialist come into my life. And he kind of gave me the down low what really was going on. He's like, here's the thing. Yes, you can go for the whole defibrillator, but in the end, that's not going to stop the issue. The issue is you got a valve that needs to be replaced and need to be repaired. This could be done. I don't know why the other doctors didn't really go in full with you to help you out on this, why they didn't talk to you about it, but we could do this. There's medication for everybody watching this at home. You have anyone who's got heart issues or they're being told doomsday, there's a medication called Entresto. Entresto is the miracle drug. It took my heart from being 20%. My openings and everything is at 55, which is actually above normal. So I'm back to living a very normal life. Now, do I have to watch when I'm eating and try to do all the right things? Yes. My heart failure issue is more based on family hereditary than it actually was, bad habits. Go figure, this happens. But Dr. Alhaj, my doctor, is the guy who saved my life. And the reason why I'm here, why I'm actually not on what they call borrowed time, but now I have more time to be here on Earth to do the things I need to do. During that time while I was in the hospital, I kind of contemplated things. And one of the things I contemplated was, do I come back to wrestling or do I just fully retire, call it a night, and enjoy whatever time I got left? Back in my mind, though, I said something to myself, and it's like, you know what, though? Yeah, you've been a promoter for so long, but your first real big loves was commentary. Why don't you push yourself and see like what you can do in 1 year? And if you just work local shows, great. I think you can do more than that. I'm telling myself this. So, time I got out of the hospital, I made the post. Hey guys, doing better. Don't worry about me. By the way, I'm now accepting bookings as a commentator. And sure enough, there was a local promotion hit me up real quick. We'd like to hire you right now. So, cool. Okay. Next thing I know, more companies hit me up. And next thing you know, I'm working on Impact Wrestling, and I got the chance. And the next thing you know, I get hit up by international promoters. They're like, we're looking for English commentary, or we like your work. And in 1 year, I went from laying on my deathbed to working shows in Canada, doing a couple historical shows in Mexico, working in Thailand, now working in Japan. I got the UK coming
I
up.
was gonna say you got the UK thing coming up too, which is huge because I don't think people understand the transference between Japanese wrestling and English wrestling. It's a language. That's the only difference because they both adhere to that. Like, if you can go back at if anybody's watching, if people are watching this and they want to know what British wrestling is about, go watch old Lionheart matches. And I don't mean Chris Jericho. I mean, go watch Lionheart matches. There's a guy that was basically carrying British wrestling for like 10 years. Rest in peace. But that he's the reason that you have guys like Pete Dunne, Tyler Bate, NXT UK, things like that. That's the guy.
You also got guys like Johnny Saint, Marty Jones.
Yeah.
And I've been very privileged to become friends with Marty Jones, a man who trained William Regal. Just think about that lineage right there. And of course, those guys' lineages is even more amazing because Robinson and Johnny Saint was trained by Billy Robinson. And Billy Robinson was trained by a gentleman by the name of Riley, who had Riley's Gym in Wiggins, which is known as a snake pit. And through Riley's Gym, Carl Gotch, the father of Japanese professional wrestling, the man who trained Inoki and Baba, came from Riley's Gym. British wrestling is ingrained in Japanese wrestling. This is why you watch like really technical sound Japanese wrestlers, is because that British style was ingrained in their training regimen.
And it's really now come full circle because you have Charlie Dempsey going to Japan, which is where you get the William Regal connection, and it all feeds
father's footsteps.
Yeah, and it all feeds back into itself. And I mean, that announcement alone is huge because of what it means. Doors are opening within a company that's been sealed off from the world for so long, to the point of where we might get that kind of thing because somebody that I just mentioned, a Pete Dunne or a Butch, he's a guy that if you got him in a Super J Cup, oh my goodness. He's
definitely what you call a wrestler's wrestler.
Yeah, that's one of those. It's one of those dream booking scenarios that you talk about. But you've got access to these amazing up and coming wrestlers because of your involvement in the UK. Your involvement, in the Far East is also going to push things to that way. You're going to have this intimate access to like, hey, this is a person to watch, and you might even have the availability to bring them to the change name venture here in Chicago. Of course. I think that's phenomenal.
He was asked about chaotic combat, so
let's talk about that because you've got this. I got to know because I love this belt. I love the designs. I want to know, like, I want to post that on our social media and be able to credit the designer of it because that's one of the coolest things I've ever seen. I love that. I love good belt designs.
Yeah, Arnie Bodenberg is the gentleman who does all my design work for my belts. Arnie, and he also designed the company logo as well too. There's a reason for that logo. It's representative of me as a survivor of something that should have killed me.
Bring that back up,
and not that one. The one you want is the one with the heart.
Okay, the belt logo
right there. Yeah, right there. That heart is a sample of being a survivor. Overcoming odds, not letting the world get you down. Very much a fighting spirit vibe to that heart. But they also have barbed wires for the grittiness that the world brings to you. And as a survivor, you have to crawl through some of those wires at times to make it to the other side. And that's what that symbol is all about.
I love the nod to the previous history of CCW as well, with the world and the logo, and you still have a little bit of that like studio feel that you always had with the Memphis, the NWA Power now. That just a tinge of like studio wrestling, but you're still like, hey, we're not going to forget where we were, but this is where we're going in the future. We're moving.
Yeah. And the whole process of the company too, a lot of people, when they first heard about it, they're like, oh, you're just going to do deathmatch wrestling. I was like, no. As a deathmatch does have a place on the cards at times, but I'm going to give you you're going to get the first exclusive. You're going to be the guy that he gets to hear stuff before anybody else. So one of the things that's going to set us apart from other companies that do deathmatch wrestling, we will not use any glass. You will not see light tubes at our show.
I love it.
The
People are
reason-
going to hate me saying that, but I love it because I don't think it needs to be there to tell a story.
And before, yeah, and some people are like, oh, but let me explain why. If you see light tubes literally every single show. Light tubes and a lot of wrestlers will say this too. Definitely guys who are not afraid to speak their minds on this, and this is from deathmatch wrestlers. A lot of them feel like it's overkill. If you see a light tube every single match, does that light tube really matter?
Right. No, to me, it doesn't. I get to the point where, like the Matt Tremont match that they had with it was him and Neil Diamond Cutter. Yeah, cool. It was cool, but it was a spectacle thing. But the problem was other matches on the card had light tubes.
Exactly.
And so it becomes a less of a thing. It's the same concept that you had in the Attitude Era, where when somebody used a chair, somebody later in the night used a chair, and somebody else used a chair, and it loses the value. Like a concerto from the Edge of Christian days, that was a really powerful, significant move. But then The Rock's going out there giving unprotected headshots to Mick Foley, and it takes the effect of like sandwiching a dude's skull between chairs away.
You see Steve Austin come out and hit Vince McMahon with the chair.
Yeah. But he's not, one guy's laying in the ring lifeless. The other guy should be, because he's took 8 to the head. Miss Foley's baby boy's out there just getting his brains scrambled. And then McMahon takes a chair shot to the back and walks back. And it's like you lose the effectiveness of it. So I agree with that. I think that's phenomenal personally. And then as a worker, I don't want to get in the ring after the glass either. Like that's just because you can get a lot of it out, but slivers of that stuff stick in the canvas, and it's just
my whole goal is to bring back stipulations, bring back the stipulation matches that people loved, bring more of that FMW wing style of deathmatch wrestling, where your main event is the stipulation match. That's what it's built up for. And not every match is going to be deathmatch, and I don't want it to be. I want that deathmatch to actually matter while you're seeing it, and you're going to have an amazing group of strong style wrestlers and technical wrestlers. You're going to have luchadors from Mexico, because my Mexican wrestling connection. So I'll have Mexican wrestlers, authentic Mexican luchadors on shows. I got wrestlers coming in from other parts of the United States, Texas, a lot of that Texas strong style, because man, right now that entire state has a scene that's not talked about, and it's a shame because every one of those boys down there can work.
I've got a couple of friends down, Nate Bradley, Nate Slater. Those are, a couple of guys that Brian Keith has come out of that area.
Dude, yes. Prime example of Texas strong style. Prime example of Texas strong style.
It is a cry. When he was on television a couple of weeks ago, I was like, Brian Keith's on TV and nobody's making a big deal about this. This is horrible, because he's like, that's a guy like, to me, Brian Keith is the Texas version of what we got when we got Shane Strickland from the Pacific Northwest. We had that same level of energy. He's a guy that brings that attitude. They wrestle different styles, but he's got that same like, hey, this guy is this region. And to me, when you look at Texas and you want to bring somebody out of that, it's Brian Keith.
Oh man,
I just love the product.
There's so many good wrestlers. I posted one today, Chris Lyons. The guy was, people talk about like when they watch him, like, man, he's kind of like Lee Moriarty. But here's the wild thing is, Chris Lyons was doing Lee Moriarty before Lee Moriarty was doing Chris Lyons. So that makes sense.
Right.
Like, Chris is that hidden gem that is like, man, he's been good for so long. And he actually broke in during a time with Brian Keith. So it's like, he's been doing this for a long time, but he's been stuck in the state of Texas for so long that everybody else is going other places. But here's this guy that's been like, okay, I know I'm good. I just need some place to call home outside of the state to be showcased for the world to see me. And me and him has been good friends for a long time. And when I came back with Chaotic, he was one of those guys where I looked at it, was like, you put him in a match with anybody, it's going to look like a real fight, because the guy's an MMA fighter. So when he throws strikes, it's coming. He's a legit catch wrestler, so he's got the submission game. He's as legitimate as a heart attack, being a tough guy. And the type of wrestler that back in the 1960s, 70s, old promoters would have loved, because it's like, yeah, he goes to a bar, you don't have to worry about him losing a fight to a guy in a bar fight. Like he's going to be the guy that's going to wreck you for being dumb. But a gentleman all the way through as well. So huge shout out to Chris. He's really good. Stonewall Rimson from out in the Houston, Texas area. He's a Dustin Rhodes Academy student. Huge upside to him. And talk about a Haas. Like this guy is like all Japan style Haas. Like when he throws a lariat, it's a lariat, and you're going to watch a guy get rocked. Like huge fan of his work. There's so many guys out of Texas, man. But that's the part that I want to bring up because here in the Midwest, who actually features wrestlers from Texas in the Midwest? Like CCW becomes that place now where it's like I hear about that Texas Strong Style. Now I get to see the Texas Strong Style up here in the Midwest because here's a carload of Texas wrestlers. Dmitry Alexandrov, who is a phenomenal all-around wrestler, but deathmatch wise, he's been killing it in Texas. I'm bringing him up. So that's
there's a guy that I love in the deathmatch scene that I haven't been able to see here a lot, and it's Oren Vate. And so, like, I hope, like, I will make the trip to Chicago to watch Oren wrestle. That's the thing. Yeah. Like, I actually ended up on a podcast talking deathmatch wrestling with him with another one of my friends, Will Gray, who runs a thing out of Louisville. And Oren was on there, and I just he's a guy you just can click with really easy.
He's a very down to earth person too. He's like one of the most approachable guys you could ever talk to.
And I know he wrestles in Texas, so he goes down there and does I cannot remember the name of it, and I apologize to everybody, but I know he wrestles Minnesota, he wrestles Texas, he's based out of Denver. So that's somebody. He does the Texas style down there as well. Yeah. I know that there's been a huge push. Like since you announced that, I've seen a lot of people from Michigan making comments on it, and I'm not one to like book anybody for it, but I see some of the names that are having their interest piqued, and I'm like, that's a person that I think would, hearing you talk now, I'm like, okay, that's a person that would fit. And I don't mean to drop people's names, but Ace Evans is out of this area, and he's an Exodus Pro student currently, or a trained wrestler.
One of the greatest friends I've never met.
And we
say that about each other all the time. We're like, we never met each other yet. If you mention my name to him, he'll always go like, I love that guy. And I feel the same way about Ace. When anybody mention him, I'm like the greatest friend I've never had a chance to meet in person. But
he's a guy.
Each other, not trying to cut you off, but like we kept each other like sanity wise, we kept each other sane during COVID. Like every day, like me and him would like message each other, and I'm like, yeah, I'm kind of having a rough day, man. Or he'll have a rough day, and we'll find a way to bring each other up and be like, no, we got this, dude. Like we're not going to let this get we're going to survive this, and when we come back, we're going to have the best times of our lives. I love that guy. He's a great human being. Good shirt maker and a hell of a wrestler.
Exactly. I've got a ton of 10%. I'll pimp his stuff on here. Face Kicked Apparel. It's on Facebook. Go check him out. He's fantastic. He does great work.
He does, and he's made a lot of my shirts too. So, yeah, I vouch on his work. Yeah, Ace is a great person. There's a lot of good Michigan wrestlers, man. Michigan's another hotbed for wrestling that I feel like a lot of people kind of overlook because that little Detroit pocket that.
There's so many guys I just want to push. Like I want to tell you, like, look, man, I love watching you wrestle here, but I want to see you somewhere else. I gotta see you get out of here.
Drop those names. Let's hear your list.
Adam Wick, when he comes back from his I think he has a torn muscle in his arm. Adam Wick's one. He's part of DTA. So the DTA guys, they move out. You have your Aaron O'Ryan, who is the general. He's been around a little. He's a little long in the tooth. He's gonna hate that I said that, but he's fantastic. He works great with everybody. And the issue that we have a lot is that promoters like to put green guys with green guys. And that's not a good thing for them because it doesn't build them. Aaron's that guy that if you put him with somebody who's in their first or second year, they're going to come out of that with a year of experience purely from facing him. And I've watched it firsthand happen this year. Guys that do travel out of the area, we know the Tommy Vendettas, the Malcolm Monroe, the Pillars. We know those guys. Other guys that are coming out of this area, and he's not Michigan, but Grimy Zach Thomas. He's a younger guy. Zach's fantastic. To go with other names, Alex Van Zant, who's not really a deathmatch wrestler, but he's a fantastic storyteller. Entertaining. I've known Alex for 15 years now, far before wrestling. Like we were in the trading card world together, Yu-Gi-Oh to be specific. But I've known him since he was a judge at like Yu-Gi-Oh competitions, and I have stories about him that he'd hate for me to say, but he posts a lot of his own stuff, so he embarrasses himself on it. Yeah. There's guys like that. There's up and comers that are coming out of this area. Thomas Bailey. There's a tag team out of here called Grim Reality that I can tell you about.
I've actually had to work with them at
SCW. Squared Circle. I was going to say, I know they could Q from that team. Not to take away from Angel, but Devon. He is one of the most professional young men that I have ever met in this business, and I cannot say enough good things. And then the women's wrestling that we have coming out of here, we've got Stella Buho, who is very new but very experienced. I mean, I think her first ever professional match was against Randy West, and what a way to put you into that, category. Anybody that is in the Randy West Schwartzy like realm of stuff is, I guess in my opinion, if you get the nod from Schwartzy, you get the nod from Randy. Randy, I don't think she really likes being called a legend, but she's a freaking legend.
Both of them I hold in very high regards as human beings too. I love Schwartzy. It's kind of weird because I never thought like me and him would become like good friends, but it's became more than that. And he's one of those guys like I'll message on a daily basis if I get the chance, or the tag team belt with the two hearts. He actually got that reference though, what the two hearts are for. It wasn't because the tag team was. I'm a Doctor Who fan, and he's a huge Doctor Who fan. So he's like, I love Doctor Who, and I love those two. And instantly, like he was the only person that got that reference. And I messaged him. I'm like, you win the free dinner tonight, good sir. Here's your coupon. And he started laughing. He's like, why is that? I was like, because he actually knew what my reference was about when other people did not.
So my intro to wrestling is I trained like 6 years ago, and then I left for a long time. I got disenfranchised because of some stuff that happened around the time. At the time, the promoters in the area were not like super great. Now it's kind of a hotbed. There's a lot of stuff going on. And the places that were active were hard to break into, and that's fine. That's not a bad thing. And those places are still active. XICW is one of them. I don't mind name dropping because they've been around for 25 years, almost 23 now. And the Monroe family. The Monroe family dynasty. It is what it is. But I got disenfranchised with it. But Schwartzy is one of those guys that I recognized from back then as a different character. And you know which one I'm talking about. There was kind of a B movie made about it, and it's
Hebrew Hammer.
Yes. That's trust me. This podcast, we can swear if you want. If you don't want to, that's fine. I don't care. I usually hit radio voice on it, and then when it's appropriate, if something happens, I'll drop a bomb. But he's one of those guys that I kind of knew from back then. I didn't get to meet him until Flophouse this year in Detroit at No Fucks Given. Which is the appropriate time to drop it. It's the name.
Yeah. The name of the show.
And that really turned me. I'm like, you know what? I like the guy's vibe. I like this Flophouse thing. I'm glad that they're going to be. I'm going to have more access to going to do that stuff with him. I got to work another show with him. He's a guy that I feel like when he's on a show, everybody else kind of brings their level up. But also, he's a locker room guy. Like he's very good at what he does in the ring, but I feel like everybody benefits from Schwartzy being on a show, and it's not just because of what's in his stash box.
What I love about him too is that he's a locker room leader type of guy. If he sees like a young person struggling, he will go out of his way to help them. He's the type of guy that wants to bring everybody up. He's kind of one thing I think that me and him both have in common is that when we were younger, I think we were more hell bent on burning down the doors around us to make an example of who we were. And then as we got older, we kind of realized, like, you know what, there's a better way, there's a better mentality, and there's a better grasp on who we could become and how we could leave a legacy for the next generation to be proud of without doing all the stupid stuff that we did when we were younger. And, you take ownership of that, and you go out of your way to teach guys the right way and teach the young folks, there's a better way to doing things. There's a better way to leave the place in a better condition than what it was before. And he's that guy. Thinking about Schwartzy too is like a lot of people now just look at him and say, oh, he does death matches, but they forget like the Johnny Saint stuff, the British type wrestling. He could do that. Oh yeah. If he wants it the Japanese strong style, like with the strikes and more of the things, he can do that. That guy is so underrated that it's scary that if you give him the right platform, the right opponent, he'll steal the show. and he's the most entertaining guy while he's giving that match because he knows how to interwork his character and he knows how to make people have a good time around him. Randy West, you talk about someone that's inspirational. Here was someone who was sold a few years ago. You may never wrestle again, let alone you may not walk again. You know, because she had a tremendous injury.
Yep.
She overcomes that, comes back tougher than ever, and has been killing it. Definitely with RPW. Like she was the Rust Belt champion and was just having bangers after bangers with great wrestlers. Her the trilogy with her and Remington Roar.
Ooh, happy birthday, by the way. I don't even care that it knocks off what day it is. Happy birthday to Remington Roar.
One of my favorite people in wrestling too. I love Rem. Rem's just a good person.
Scariest individual. If you have never talked to them.
Scariest, nicest guy. The scariest, nicest guy in wrestling.
He's just like, walking around with a machete, and you're like, I'm not going to talk to you. You got the mask on, you got the machete. I think I'm going to see my way as far that way as I can possibly go. But then you talk to him, and you're like,
on commentary, I always say, here's the man who sits on a throne of human skulls. That's always how I put him over. He's like Conan the Barbarian come to life. I mean, you look at him, he's this big, muscular, chiseled up dude, not roided out like bodybuilder, but he looks like the old time strong man, like scary farm boy strength. Like if he gets angry, I run because like
I think the two scariest people I've ever met in person and for different reasons were Roar, and then I found out later not scary, and then Shane Mercer, who I'm still convinced is terrifying. So it's great guy. I am terrified of Shane Mercer because he can throw me at, and I'm over 200 pounds, and I am convinced he can just whoop, whoop.
You're talking to the guy who actually gave Shane one of his first big breaks in wrestling, way back in 2012.
Every interaction I've had has been fantastic.
He's a phenomenal human being on top of being a phenomenal wrestler.
We were very close ringside when he threw the kid that was on fire. Like it almost hit hit our broadcast table, almost took out the entire thing. So you talk about something, you've known him, or you've been in this since 2001. You said you walked away in 2014.
I did.
Did we touch on why you walked away, or is that something you don't?
It was just my time.
Okay.
I done everything I could for the state of Kentucky when I was running shows there. And when back at that time, the athletic commission, they handcuff you so much on what you can do, and we've had some of the largest attendance in the state. This is one of those things where OVW guys don't like to be reminded of this. I ran a show during the same time OVW ran a show down the street. Now, it wasn't on purpose. It was a total mistake. Didn't look at the calendar, booked the event anyway, had a banger of a show. And I don't know, kind of saying banger at 40 years old kind of sounds weird, but was a banger. But it was a banger of a show. Like every match delivered. And back in the days, the original Pro Wrestling Freedom. Ask Shane Mercer about PWF in Kentucky. He'll talk about this all day. Him, Alex Zane from New Japan got some of the first big breaks there. Mary Dobson, who's now Valkyrie and WWE, she wrestled on that card. It's like a lot of like the young, no one didn't know who they were at the time, but now they're like, now everybody knows who they are. Wrestle for me. So that building, we had 400 packed. And the building only had 250 seats. We had standing room only to the point the fire marshal called and was like, if you allow one more person in, we have to shut you down. OVW now, it's running down the street. They have 3 former TNA stars on their show. They only drew 35 people.
Somebody I know used to be the television director at OVW, probably, I would say 6 to 7 years ago. My buddy Mike, I met him on TikTok. I've done a couple of shows with him. He's a really cool dude, but he's also very open about his time at OVW. And so he has said some things, and I'm going to ask him about that. I'm going to ask him about that show. I want to see him go, how do you know about that? Because I feel like he was involved at that time. It was during
the time of a gentleman by the name of Frank Miller. He was kind of running the ship for OVW at the time. This is before Al Snow and all of them came aboard.
Well, he was, and I think he was on that transitional time in between. Then he was very
a lot of guys. That was, I'll say this for OVW, those were dark years for OVW. It really was. What is going on now for OVW is, I guess, is really good for them.
Mhm.
I'm going to say I'm not the biggest fan of Ohio Valley Wrestling, but I'm not going to bury them because I'm a professional. So I can at least say my piece to say, not really a fan of the product, but the history of their promotion and what the school did at that time, sure, they helped create a lost stars. And the reason why, you had a guy by the name of Rip Rogers.
Yep.
Rip Rogers is the greatest trainer in the world. I'll say that about Rip all day. The Outrunners who are on AEW wrestled for me. And the
Absolutely
Outrunners, my
enjoy
favorite
watching
tag
them.
team, one of my favorite tag teams I ever got the chance to work with. They are a prime example of what a Rip Rogers guy all about. When you meet anyone who say I was trained by Rip, and Rip says, "Yep, that's one of my kids," you book them. Why? You're not going to have a bad match out of them. They can wrestle any style, and then if they wrestle basic, they do really good basics. That's really
Mhm.
entertaining. Yeah, Rip's the best. But when Rip and OVW separated ways, it wasn't the same.
That's and I don't think that there's anything wrong with that. I mean, so, like the wrestlers, obviously, I think it's a good thing because it brought eyes to the business.
Yeah.
However, if you're in the business, you're watching the show, going, "This is just a
ugly.
show. This
It was
is just
ugly, though.
all this is a show. All this is just this is a wrestling show that's scripted, that's going on, and you could tell like what was real, what wasn't real, what was embellished, what wasn't embellished, and it's only from being around the product, from being around things like that, and knowing some of the people that were around it. I mean, I don't mean to dig stuff up, but like there's an early part of the thing where Danny Moe is in there, and she's a phenomenal women's wrestler, part of one half of the Neon Ninjas with Facade. And I've seen her. I've been in this. I've wrestled on the same shows as her. She's fantastic. Love her. Love the spots. She does one of my favorite spots from this year. There was a powdered substance bit that took place, and I was there for it. I thought it was fantastic. It was hilarious. And then she ended up getting the pin on Rick Cartier, I think. And
a great worker too.
Rick is when his name says old school, he's old school.
Dude,
Rick
he's the closest thing that this region's got to a Steve Carino. Like straight up, like he's a guy that I think because he's a plus size guy, a lot of people kind of overlook him. And I'll tell people straight up all the time, he is good. Like he can wrestle Japanese style, and he's an old school Memphis guy too. When he wants to pull up the old school Memphis. Phenomenal.
He's a plus size guy, and he dresses like it, and I think that puts that little tinge into people's minds. Yeah. So, not to divert away from the wrestling, but one thing I like to do here is I like to deep dive a little bit, and I like to find certain things on social media. Now, the nice thing is you curate your social media pretty well, and I don't think it's on purpose. I just think that you're a very careful and calculated person in the most sense. However, your friends happen to not be so careful and calculated and like to rib you. So I have to ask you about this picture.
Oh, yeah. So that's back in the days when I did this gimmick called Johnny Rock, which is kind of like the illegitimate love child of, I want to say like Elvis was like kind of like Unknown Henson. That whole gimmick was so over. That was like me being bored one day. And I decided like, okay, I want to create a character that's so over the top that people's either going to love it or they're going to hate me by loving it for hating it for the right reasons. The whole gimmick was, here's a guy frozen in time. He was the original guy who created rock and roll. He was the guy who wrote all the love songs that Elvis stole. Elvis was the reason why he got put in the Cairo chamber and was frozen. He's a
little bit of like Eddie from Rocky Horror mixed with like a Bubba Hotep kind of thing. Okay, yeah, I'm digging it. Yeah.
It was like the guy was the world midget tossing champion, bear fighter in the circus, like all these like stupid accolades. Like I used to like the ring announcer were like ring announcer. He's like, in 1937, he was a World's Fair pie eating champion, and people were like, "What does this have to do with wrestling?" And like, and just like the stupid things, just for me to entertain myself, but it get the crowd into it too. And well, there was a guy who was actually an Elvis impersonator that used to come to the wrestling shows. Got furious without that gimmick, and I put on the jumpsuit one night. I had his custom-made jumpsuits, and I would come to the ring wearing it. And I remember one night it was myself, my good friend Zodiac, and a gentleman by the name of J.R. Rock. We wrestled Chucky Smooth, Jared Sloan, and a lady by the name of Felony Fox. 6-person tag match. midway through this match, I'm doing the karate chops, the Judy chops, all this stuff that just be the stupid stuff. And I remember hearing in the crowd, he's disrespecting the suit. He's disrespecting the suit. And he's screaming on top of his lungs. And like, when you're wrestling, and this, yourself as a former wrestler, it's one of those things where you don't pay attention to the fan because you're trying to work your match, but you're trying to work the whole crowd too. And I was trying to work the whole crowd while doing my match, not the guy. Sure enough, after the match is over with, I go in the back. A guy named Apollo from H&IC walked up to me. He says, "Man, you got more heat than the sun." And I said, "What do you mean?" He's like, "Dude, you had an Elvis impersonator wanting to pull a revolver on you. You got to come and see this," because like security's trying to escort him out the building.
Dude's trying to pull a John Hinckley on you.
And sure enough, dude pulls me into the back. We open up the curtain, and there's this old Elvis guy. And I'll send you the pictures after the podcast. So I have to tell the whole story after this podcast. There's so much.
Okay.
But yeah, I had a 1-year-long feud with a fan that wanted to have a street fight against me to see who was the battle of the world's greatest entertainers. The guy who came up with the kayfabe story of being frozen in time by Elvis Presley versus a man who legitimately thought he was Elvis Presley. He was Elvis Presley, and like Elvis died so he could be his blood vessels could pump through his own heart.
Hailing from Tupelo, Mississippi.
Oh man, let me tell you something here, brother. I'll be right here talking about this all night long. And this guy legitimately thought he was Elvis.
Take a Quaalude, bro.
Sorry. And the dude was a Vietnam War vet too, so he's seen things. So instantly like, man, this guy is legit nuts.
Like, this guy got Agent Orange in his garage. He's just keeping barrels of napalm in there.
Just wait till I show you. I send you all this stuff here because you're going to be dying laughing the entire night. Just like, this is the greatest story that needs to be told on another podcast. Like, it's just hilarious.
I'm fine. Yeah, we can sit down and tell that anytime. I'll get my Elvis. I'll go get my knockoff Elvis shades and sit here and do it. I don't care. I don't even. Speaking of shades, there's actually a thing about Schwartzy. I was working camera for a show in September, and so part of my outfit, which is unfortunate because like when I did camera, they were still like, "Hey, you might wrestle here. You should probably stay in character." And I'm like, okay. So my character, the Hoochie Daddy, I just short shorts, but I was like, "Yo, can I still wear like the black T-shirt just with the company logo on it and whatnot?" And they're like, "Yeah, but wear the hat and the glasses," because I was just backwards baseball cap and the big blue blocker glasses. Well, Schwartzy wears glasses very similar to that. And I've got him on, and he walks in, and I said, "Hey, it's no fly zone with the glasses," and he goes, "Oh, I'm sorry," and I'm like, "No, dude, no." I said, "Please put them back on." I was like, I'm gonna take them off because this place gets dark because it was all like nice and uplit and everything. It was in like a really classy VFW, but. I'm like, no. And he goes, "Oh, okay." And I'm like, "No, please don't." I was like, "I don't want to have a bad rap with you. I'm sorry about that." I was like, I loved the Flophouse show. So it was one of those things where I was like,
you rib Schwartzy. Oh,
yeah. And I wasn't trying to either. I was just
crazy.
Like, I'm trying to help my guys set up sound. Cause like we did sound and camera and everything for the show. And, is that my child? Sorry about that. She had come in here earlier, and for a minute, I thought she like popped back in here. She's like a ninja, 5-year-olds, man. They're quiet when they want to be, and they're not when they're not. You have an absolute, not to divert from this, but you just have a stellar resume, and there's a reason because we've talked about it that you are called Professional Wrestling Swiss Army Knife, and you have done everything that is on there to do. And I think you are a case study in why you should know everything in the business. Don't adhere yourself to one thing. Don't just say, I have to be a wrestler. Do everything. A little bit.
The way that all came about, and I know you didn't want to like go into like how I got into wrestling, but my way
I just don't want to ask you, "Hey, how'd you get into wrestling?" I hate asking that specific question.
But the thing is, though, I find it, looking at all the guys I met through the years, I feel like my story is really interesting because it's like, I tell people this all the time, like I'm the luckiest man on earth for having the life that I've lived. So go back in time, 8th grade, I'm sitting in the business tech lab class. There's a teacher named Miss Leak. don't hold nothing against her now, but she was like the fuel to my fire for why I became the guy that I became. And she asked all the kids in class, what do you want to be when you get older? What do you want to do? And everybody's like, I want to be a fireman. I want to be a teacher. Like all the like, Joe jobs. Nothing against them. But as my mind was like, wrestling. That's all I want to do. So I looked at everybody else like, man, well, I want to have the cool job. She came up to me, what are you going to do? And I said, I want to be in professional wrestling. Now, I never said I want to be a professional wrestler or whatever. So I just want to be in professional wrestling. And she looked at me, looked at my 8th grade self and said, that's cute. But that's a pipe dream that probably never will happen. Now, what do you really want to be when you get older? Bro. Back in my mind, though, like I was so crushed because she was like one of my favorite teachers. And I was like, you don't think I could do this? Like, wow. So from 8th grade through the 11th grade, I never told another soul what I wanted to do. So sure enough, fate happens. English, 11th grade year, sitting there with my book open, already finished all my work in class. And I had a PWI 500 tucked inside my English book, going through the list, reading names, wondering who these people were, because the internet was still like a thing, but it wasn't like the big boom with the YouTubes. I'm old as hell. So sure enough, my teacher, Miss Diane Struby, walked up behind me and she saw the book. And she's like, oh, who's number 1 this year? Threw me off guard because I'm like, this woman knows what the PWI is? And I'm looking up and I'm like, huh? And she's like, yeah, I read the PWI too. And I'm like,
it's 2000 or 2001. So we're looking at, was it Rock or Austin?
Yeah. And it was during that time too when Dean Malenko was like really high on the list, which I'm a huge Dean Malenko guy.
So was it 97 that he was number 1 or 98?
I have to look back at the thing on that, but either which way.
I knew he had the number 1. Malenko's the guy that you watch to, like, if you want to learn how to do something, you watch.
If you want to be a wrestler,
you
watch Malenko. Yeah. And I was just so mind boggled. First thing I was kind of boggled by, she didn't take my magazine, but she was also like, yeah, she's like, she dropped the magical words to me. My son is actually a professional wrestler. Like my mind was completely like, you now have became the coolest woman on earth. May I talk to you? You hold
the keys to the gate.
She opened the doors for me when no one would. So in a class, I look at her and I said, I haven't told another person this in a long time. I said, I actually want to be in professional wrestling. And I was instantly like wincing because I was waiting for like, you're gonna poke your eyes out, kid. Yeah, no. And she was like, you know what? You can do it, but it's going to take a lot of hard work, a lot of effort. You're going to probably want to have a lot of ibuprofen, and you're probably going to be best friends with ice packs before you know it. She's like, this is speaking from a wrestling mom. She's like, my son's a professional wrestler, went to the power plant. She's like, but if you're interested, we have a show coming up. And I'll give you free tickets so you could actually meet my son and talk to the guys. Greatest, like Willy Wonka in the Chocolate Factory. I got the golden ticket.
Come with me and you'll be in a world of submission. Hold some. Whatever. I can't sing, so I'm not gonna go on the thing. But like, it's just turnbuckles floating through the sky.
Bro, it was for me. So went to the show, met her son, met another gentleman by the name of Spike Moore, who was one of the first people who gave me my very first start in wrestling, and started like instantly like, okay, kid, you want to be a wrestler? Yep. All right. Well, we're going to be here for whatever, and we'll put you through the training. Now, they didn't know I was at the time. I was like, 17-year-old kid. They were like, because I look older than I did. I mean, as a kid, they're like, yeah, he's an adult. Wasn't. All right, let's go through the training. And so, dude, I was doing like mile runs around the building, like suicide runs. They would make us do like hundreds of push-ups, hundreds of squats. It was literally what we're getting put through was like the power plant type training where it's like, we'll weed you out. For those who don't want to be a wrestler, don't worry, we got you.
Right.
And yeah, so they were. And I didn't want to quit because I knew right then there was like, if I quit now, I will never hear the end of it from my dad, because my dad was like old school, like, you
finish
quit,
what you started.
And yeah, man, he was that guy. So that was ingrained in me to be like that. It was installed and in my spirit. So survived it. Months go on, setting up, taking down, doing all the grunt work, all the things that people need to do to pay their, not want to say even pay their dues, just a proper way of being in the business. And I remember I got the magical phone call. Hey, I know you've been training to be a wrestler, but do you have a suit and tie by any chance? Yeah, I do, for church. But why? Well, uh, our ring announcer is not here tonight, and we need someone to do commentary or at least ring announce the show. You have a good enough voice. How you like to be our guy? In the back of my head, I'm like, you want to be a wrestler? But the back of my head, I'm like, this is a chance to finally do something. I'm like,
step between those ropes no matter what.
and I was like, yeah, yes, sir. So showed up in suit and tie, the whole things, and hands were shaking because I'm thinking like, oh my god, like I've talked in front of public, but this is like finally you get to touch your dream. You can finally you're finally doing this. And at the end of the show, I talked to Spike about this, and I said, so I'm not going to ever be trained to be a wrestler. And he said, far from it, kid. He's like, we're still going to train you. He's like, but it's a good thing that you learn how to do this. And he gave me the best advice right then and there. He said, let's say you got an injury. Would I quit your dream right then and there, or would you find another reason to still be in this business? And I was like, I'm trying to still be in this business. He's like, good. He said, outside of ring announcing, you should learn how to be a referee. He says, being a referee is even better because you learn ring psychology. Probably far more than a wrestler does, because you're going to learn your placement. You're going to learn in front of the camera where to be, where not to be, how to play to the camera even more, because referees have to. A good referee does this. Josh Patterson, big shout out to Josh, but a good referee knows what they're doing. And also a good referee, old school referees, if a wrestler gets lost during a match, hey guys, I want to help call your match for you to get you back where you need to be at. Do some of the best referees I ever watched could call a match just as good as a professional wrestler, and they were good at it. And that taught me how to call matches. It taught me the etiquette of the importance of a referee, importance of a commentator, importance of an announcer. I even served hot dogs in concession stands. I did grunt work. I did cameraman work. When I literally tell people that I'm a human Swiss Army knife, and that was a nickname given to me, not something I moniker myself for. It was because literally by the time I was 21, 22 years old, I wanted to learn every single job in the business. I learned the importance of being the ticket taker, and also the customer service that comes with that, how to make people feel welcome at your shows, the importance of doing security properly, and not just sitting there watching the show, but watching to make sure the wrestlers are safe. Or if an object flies in the air, you're the guy that grabs it midair before it can land on someone to protect them.
I have a story to tell you about this after that. You'll get a kick out of it.
But I learned the importance of every single job, because I was told, what if you go to a company and they already have 20 wrestlers and there are 20 really good wrestlers? Do you get that job? Probably not. But what if that job is looking for a really good referee and they have a mediocre referee, but they need a really good one? Oh, you're really good at your job. Guess what? Now you got a job. What if they don't have a commentator? Let's talk. You know the moves. You know how to do your job there. Guess what? Now you got a job as a commentator or a backstage agent. One of my favorite roles. I wish companies would book me for more often, because I love putting stuff together. I love creating that atmosphere of every match is different by the moveset, or we protect them. Hey, what's your finisher? Oh, I do a super kick. Hey guys, no one does a super kick at all but that one guy, because now that matters. We
don't need to see 5 burning hammers on a show.
Not at all. No,
especially when 3 of them are getting kicked out. I don't even want to see 1 on a show. I want to see 1. If you want to hit somebody with that better be at the end of a 9-match program, and that's what finally puts the guy out. Harkening back to what we were talking about the strong style and things like that.
And that's actually something I do on my own shows as a promoter too. I actually protect finishers on my shows. I actually have a list, and guys who work for me will testify to this. I tell guys all the time, the spine buster is this guy's move. The super kick is his move. The brain buster is this move. No one else doesn't do that. Why?
I don't even have. So that's the funny thing. I didn't even have a finisher, because I lost all my matches, and I still do. And I'm okay with that because I don't care. Like, that's part of my character. My character is like,
you know your role, and you do your role really well.
He just gets his ass kicked. Like, that's as simple as that. I have a submission finisher for somebody to pick out of. It was given to me by Alex Van Zandt, actually. He was like, you need to do the trailer hitch because it's kind of a white trash move and nobody uses it, and Jamie Noble did it really well. And he's right, Jamie Noble did do it really well. And you can put it on anybody, and that's why I have it there. Otherwise, most of the time it's just me getting beat up during a tag match, which is why I like managing instead, because I still get hit, but I don't have to worry about the rest of the stuff in the match.
But you know, the thing is about managers, the art of a manager is almost disappeared because so many guys don't understand what a manager does. A lot of guys will come out and they will try to steal all the thunder from the match, get all eyes on them. That's not your job. Your job is to focus on the guys in the ring. Your job is to help your guy, if you're heel, you want your guy that you're managing or girl to get all the heat. You're helping them with the heat. Now, you're also there to help the babyface to become more over because now it's a 2-on-1 handicap match, but the referee's not seeing it. A good heel manager knows how to get all the eyes of the referee. A good ref knows how to play off the heel manager as well. The other thing that also that a lot of people don't understand about old school wrestling managers, they were legit managers. They took care of the wrestlers' bookings. They made sure the fees were agreed upon. The wrestler didn't have to worry about that. The manager took care of that.
Mm-hmm.
They also booked the car rentals. They helped book the flights. They took care of that for all their wrestlers. Gary Hart is one of my biggest, I want to say mentors, but one of the biggest heroes that I looked up to for that business purpose alone, that when he said he was a business manager, he was a businessman. And he took care of everything for the great Kabuki and Muda and Brody and Abdullah and all those guys. And in his book, which is out of print now, but I actually have a copy of it, he goes into detail about why today's managers are not really managers. They're just there. And there's some guys that are phenomenal, but I feel like a lot of guys today, and girls too, that get put in the valet roles, I don't think a lot of them don't really comprehend, like, you can create so much magic by doing the bare minimum, but when you do it, and you do it right, it gets a crowd. Like, if you know, for example, babyface is in the ropes, you don't just run up there and get them. A lot of times, what I like to do when I was a manager, I would slowly look over at the crowd and give them that evil grin, like they kind of know, like, oh, here he's about to do it. That son of a gun, you know. They get all angry at you, and then you choke, and then right before the referee turns around, oh, you fixed your hair like nothing happening. Hey, ref, how's it going? You know, and people be like, and man, Southern fans especially, they'll be like,
oh yeah,
like, oh my God.
That you bring up a good point though too, because you have to know the crowd that you're going against too, and it's without a knock on the people up here, but Northern crowds really don't play off to the manager quite as well, and I will give the Southern crowds that, or even really once you get kind of like to the Chicago, Missouri, angling down that way. And then I've noticed East Coast crowds really do. For some reason, I haven't noticed it a lot with Cleveland wrestling either, but the Cleveland, Detroit, Akron, like that market does not, even like the Pittsburgh, Erie stuff, they don't play to managers very well in that regard. Maybe it's like hey, we don't care that you're here. We're here to see the stuff in the ring. I don't get it. But at the same time, maybe it's because it's become such a lost art that you need people to take up that role to start to get people back into that, to believe that kind of thing. And that's why, I mean, and I don't mean to gush on it, but I'm so enamored by your career because you've done all of those things. There's a couple of things I haven't done that I want to try my hand at some point. I'd love to ring announce. Like, I have a history in radio broadcasting. That's like, to me, I'm like, I could either, you could do the puking thing. Hey, welcome to 94.7 WCSX. I'm screaming Scott, and imitating Scott. Hated that when I did that to him in the studio. I worked as an intern at Riff for a couple of months, and I used to do that. And he's like, "Don't do that. Don't do that." And I'm like, "That's what you sound like." He goes, "I hate it." And I'm like, "Please listen to yourself on the radio sometime." Then,
I feel like with ring announcers, that's another art form that everyone should have their own shtick, their own rhythm for what they do. But I feel like there's some guys as ring announcers, they overcompensate for a certain lack of skills, or maybe a lack of knowledge that hasn't really been taught to them. to be a good ring announcer, there is a rhyme and reason to why you do things. There's importance of proper introduction when you do a real proper introduction to somebody. Like I always like to do this when I ring announce for shows. If you have a main event that's a title match, I want to get the boxing ring announcing presentation.
Mhm.
Every other match, though, I will do the whole "ladies and gentlemen, coming down the aisle," and they'll come down.
The Fink.
Yes,
Yeah.
and I don't try to like copy Howard, but Howard's a big inspiration for everyone who's been a ring announcer.
Oh, everybody. I mean, I think in general in wrestling,
he's the greatest ring announcer of all time. Straight up, he's the greatest of all time. He is the best at what he does, and him and some people don't like the Buffer brothers. I don't get it because I think Bruce and Michael both are top notch.
God, what a wild story with those two not even knowing they were brothers. Like, just
yeah.
Everybody's looking at it going, "Yeah, we see you."
One of the things I have in common with them, we're all adopted.
Yeah.
So like Michael, Bruce was talking about that on a podcast about his brother Michael. He's like, "Yeah, my dad didn't raise him. He was adopted by my grandparents, and we didn't know what, he was just brought his own life." So, but I always want to get that main event a huge thing. Like you want to make it the big fight feel, and you want to make sure
come back
both wrestlers get the same nod for it.
You end up coming back, because I've seen it happen a lot in shows where you come back and you're like, hey, intermission's over, second half of the show begins. And usually the second half is a misnomer because you had 6 matches on the first part, 3 matches on the back half. You got the heat up match, you got you either got a really hot match to come out of the thing, and then you kind of have a palate cleanser, and then you have the main, or you have like the co-mains, I guess. You got something to heat it up, and then you have the co-mains. And it always feels strange because a lot of people, and it's not to their fault because no one's ever talked to them about this, but the announcing for that first match back from intermission is not the same ring announcing that needs to take place in the main event. There's a gravitas that needs to be held with the main event, whether it's a title match or not. If it's the last match on the card, that's the go home. That's why people are here. People are here to see that match. And I want to hear it be big, like, and go over the top, go grandiose with it. It doesn't need to be small. You don't need to be meek about it. And I feel like sometimes promoters themselves don't do a good job telling their ring announcer, like, hey, go bigger with this, especially if it's somebody who's inexperienced. I don't want to say, because I know a lot of ring announcers, and a lot of them are just inexperienced. They have the confidence, but they just don't have that. They've never had somebody on their shoulder go, hey, this is the moment where you elevate yourself. Yes. And everybody else is going to be elevated. Like, they're going to think that this is the coolest thing in the world by doing it.
One of my favorite things I do when I get like a really good sound guy, your sound guy and your ring announcer sound guys should be like married to each other, because it's like, that's your best friend. Because when I do main events, if I have a really good sound guy that understands what my concept is, I don't call anyone out to the ring. They play the music. The guy comes out. He gets in his corner. Next music plays. The other guy comes out. And then if you have really good production, you could dim the lights. You have that one spotlight up on the ring. And then all of a sudden you're like, ladies and gentlemen, it is now time for your main event. And it's like, yeah, the crowd gets, because you got that aura. Now
it's I call it the MSG effect. Yeah, because that's the main event at Madison Square Garden. That's how that's always presented. Corner, announcer. Mike's either coming from the ceiling, which I know happens a lot at MSG. They bring the mic down from the ceiling.
I love it.
HBO Fight Night, that was always done that way. You've got Manny, it's 2002, and Manny Pacquiao's beating up on some poor guy that they were like, hey, we'll pay you $50,000 to go get punched in the face 18 times and then fall down. Like, that was
the most punishing punches in the face.
Yeah, it's watching Pacquiao. I remember watching Pacquiao.
What a fighter! What a great fighter! Yeah.
Phenomenal on it. And sorry, I don't mean to get off topic with it. It is.
I'm a huge boxing historian myself too, so not just wrestling, but I also like to commentate MMA, boxing, and other sporting events too. I always tell people too, as a commentator, I don't see myself as a wrestling commentator. I'm a sports commentator who does wrestling.
So what's your opinion on Mauro Ranallo then? Interesting, because he's a guy that does both.
Phenomenal.
Or did both,
he's phenomenal at his job. And when he's excited, you could tell it's real excitement coming from him. I always hate hearing commentators who scream and shout just for the sake of screaming and shouting to get themselves over. When guys like him, like Joey Styles and others, when they were like, "Oh my God," like when they were like, "Holy crap, do you see
Mamma mia!
yeah. But it was like, oh my God, I wasn't expecting this, and it's great. And it's a great reaction because it's a natural reaction. My biggest commentating hero was Gordon Soley, and he's the dean of wrestling. Every wrestling commentator studied Gordon Soley because Gordon Soley knew every hole in the book. Gordon Soley also had a medical surgeon as his neighbor, so he would go to the surgeon and show them these moves and say, "Now, how would that affect the human anatomy?" And then all of a sudden, he gave you medical terms.
And this guy's like, "Would you, Gordon? It's 8 o'clock at night. I'm trying to,
yeah,
I just imagine him knocking on the window. But what about this?
Yeah.
Here's a videotape. Yeah. Please put it in. I'll stand out here."
My first childhood memories of wrestling was actually hearing Gordon's voice. This is the first, and I kid you not. I remember as a young kid in 6:05 Eastern time, sitting in my dad's lap or watching wrestling, little boy, and I hear that whole, "Ladies and gentlemen, this is Gordon Soley signing off." You hear that raspy voice, and a man who smoked like 3 packs a day and drink his vodka. He had that scarred up raspy voice, old time radio announcer voice, and that was my voice in my childhood. That was the guy that I look up to, and still to this day, like, we'll give nods to Gordon Soley on commentary when someone's bleeding. I always do, the thing with like Peapod. I'm like, Peapod, right now, I want to say he is done. He is wearing the proverbial crimson mask. Like little things, because it's a nod to Gordon, because it is what it is. He called it in a very poetic way, and he's wearing a crimson mask. A group of wrestlers brawling around the ring. It's now a Pier 6 brawl. The little terminology. It's still to this day. I even like to use the word suplex. So the suplex, it's a belly to belly suplex. Even MMA fighters. If you go back and watch the original UFC, Jim Brown would call it Jim Brown. When Dan Severn was suplexing the poor soul out of his shoes, what a great belly to back suplex. Because Gordon Soley called it a suplex, I shall now call it a suplex as well.
I have not done a ton of commentating, but I have like an inspiration for that kind of thing as well. And oddly enough, it comes from the hockey world. I'm a huge hockey fan. It's my absolute favorite sport of all time. And I'm spoiled here in Detroit because I have the wonderful voice stylings of one Ken, and he is Ken Cal, and he is fantastic. So it's, Datsuk to Zetterberg in the offensive zone, and he scores! And like, that's you get just that one big inflection. Otherwise, you have that, and then you have Paul Wood on the other side. And Paul Wood, he's the very stoic. And that was a great pass on there. That's their second time this season they've connected in the last 7 games. And that, to me, the best combo for that, and I don't know how your opinion on this, but Mike Tenay and Don West, they are my favorite commentating duo. Everybody talks about JR.
Don West.
Yeah, everybody wants to talk about JR and King, and I don't have a problem with them. To me, like, I loved the era of wrestling that I was really, really invested in and old enough to kind of understand the stuff was that 2004 through like 2008. So I had prime, like, early TNA in that era, and I got that's why I got to meet, I got to learn who the Motor City Machine Guns were and things like that. And then, you're in training and Saban walks through the door and you're like, or, Petey Williams, he's on his comeback run and they're like, "Hey, Petey's going to roll with you today." And I'm like, "Say what?" That's a thing. But it was the announcers that brought me in. They sucked me. It wasn't the Tunnels. It wasn't Abyss, which I love Abyss. It wasn't Father James Mitchell. It was Mike Tenay and Don West, because they were the consistent. They were the thing that brought me in. They were the soundtrack to me learning wrestling because they were insightful yet entertaining.
Oh, absolutely. Huge thing too that people don't realize about how good Mike Tenay really was. Here was a guy that really helped bring Lucha Libre into the masses of the United States as a commentator. He educated I hate to say this, you can go back and watch WCW, and I love Bobby Heenan, but Heenan never gave the Mexican wrestlers no credit.
It was a struggle. If you go and watch, because I do another show, it's called Monday Night Madness. We go back and we watch WCW Nitro episodes. And the first year of that show, where it's Mongo, Bischoff, and Bischoff was a lot better commentator than people
Bischoff
remember.
was a solid commentator, man. He was solid at what he did.
But between him and Heenan, and all Heenan is doing is yelling about Mongo's dog, I'm like, Bobby, I love you, but please be outside the ring. Don't be at the commentary table. You don't give the guys credit in the ring. I got Alex Wright doing stuff that you don't even see today, and you're just like, it's just a kid from Germany, and you're like, thanks.
Yeah.
But Tenay was the first one when Mexican wrestlers started showing up. People forget Worlds Collide was one of those huge influential pay-per-views. First time that really in the United States people get to see Mexican Lucha Libre.
Mm-hmm.
And Mike Tenay was the one who called the entire show, because he was the one out of all the American commentators that knew those guys. He knew those moves. He knew the history of the mask, the traditions of the families. Huge influence on me, because I do commentary in Mexico. Work for DTU. Shout out to Crazy Boy in Mexico, and also I got the privilege to work with the Moreno dynasty, who runs Arena Azteca Broken, and that building has been around for 62 years. I'm the first American to ever commentate and to do English play-by-play in that arena's history. And
that's impressive. And I mean, we have a retirement coming up too. I know Blue Demon is getting ready to retire in March, I think.
He's passing the legacy on to the next generation to carry on the family's name.
BD3, if you will. So that's you. Speaking of Lucha Libre and things like that, there's something that I wish would come back to wrestling, and it's Lucha Underground, and not necessarily Lucha Underground as we know it, but I love the telenovela style storytelling that came along with that. And I think that's why I like TNA so much, is because it was a pre-Hogan Dixie Carter involvement.
It's its own little universe.
It's a Jerry, it was a Jerry and Jeff Jarrett thing. And as much as like I rib on Jeff Jarrett, like we talk a lot of shit about Jeff Jarrett here, mostly slap nuts and his siren music and the things like that. But when he was like behind the scenes and not putting himself at the forefront of stuff, he was behind a lot of really good storytelling. And that's what I loved about Lucha Underground. And I'll still go back and watch episodes when I can, because
it's great.
There was a cohesive story, and I got to see Mil Muertes and like all these fantastic, and people you see now, like, I mean, Ricochet is cool now, but when he was Prince Puma, it was phenomenal. It was character.
Phenomenal too. Yeah, the way that CCW is filmed, if you actually really watch it, you kind of notice the Lucha Underground style. That's actually how we like to film our shows. A great guy by the name of Xavier Camacho, who's one of my dearest of friends. Is
that the Camachos out of Texas?
Nope, it's Camacho out of Chicago.
Okay,
so he's a Camacho from. I call him Macho Camacho every time I see him. But I love that kid. He should be directing Hollywood films the way that he does things. He made my wrestling shows into a Christopher Nolan film, because the way the camera would follow the wrestler, and then when the referee would do the counts, when the referees would do the count, you're right behind the referee, so you look like you're counting right along with the ref. It's so cinematic. And Lucha Underground was a huge influence. Talking about directing, producing, and filming shows, I was very lucky to learn that style of film from a gentleman by the name of Mickey Grant. Mickey Grant, the reason why he's probably should be considered one of the most influential people in wrestling history, he's the man who actually helped create World Class Championship Wrestling.
Okay. The
way that World Class was filmed. World Class was ahead of its time. The way they would do the backstage locker room interviews, no one wasn't doing that back then. The vignettes, the montage videos, they were the first ones to do it. The rock and roll music being used, they were the first ones that did it. Why? Because of Mickey. It was Mickey's idea. Mickey was like, well, I have to use Mickey's voice, because it's like listening to like an old wizard when he would talk to you, like, well, there was this time when I watched that Rocky movie and I said to myself, why are we doing this for wrestling? And look what it's doing for boxing. That's amazing. Here's here's Rocky Balboa beating on a slab of meat. And it builds up, and then you see Apollo Creed in the gym doing this. Well, why can't Kerry Von Erich be lifting hay bales in the family's ranch, and then Doc and Gordy over there are drinking beers in the bar and beating up some guys in a bar fight? Like, why are we not building up these characters? And so he came up with all these ideas of, let's film your real life character. Like, okay, like here's Gino Hernandez, this handsome Spaniard sitting in this Corvette with this beautiful blonde girl next to him. And he's got the 3-piece suit on, and he knows he's good. He knows he's a good-looking guy. He knows he's a phenomenal wrestler. He knows he can get any woman he wants, and he will tell you that to your face while speeding off in his Corvette out of the parking lot. So Mickey influenced me on that, and every time he would call me, it'd be 4 or 5 hour conversations, and he always told me, he's like, "Do you have a pen and paper ready? Here's some ideas." And he would drop this knowledge of film directing. This guy's an award-winning film director who just happened to do wrestling.
Well, and we wouldn't have things like without things like him, we wouldn't have the bad guy promo. Bad times don't last, but bad guys do, because you get that purple, the purple Razor Ramon thing. Like, you're telling, like, this guy is supposed to be, a Scarface-esque thing. And speaking of that,
biggest success comes from Mickey Grant's ideas. And Mickey will never get put in the Hall of Fame, and it's the biggest tragedy in wrestling, because without him, we wouldn't have modern day wrestling on television the way it's filmed.
So speaking of that specifically, I seen somebody, because they're using a different camera angle on AEW now, which is very much an indie wrestling camera angle. If you look at it, you see this much of the ringside, and then it's basically level. And somebody goes, "Oh, that's like a video game camera angle." And I'm like, "No, that's a world-class angle." That was that weird angle that not a weird angle, but it was a great one, where it was basically you focused in on the ring, and then you had, you could see, like, essentially where the ring, went in because of perspective rate, but then it was the wrestler was the focus of it. And that was a world-class thing. And everybody's like, "Oh, they're using this new camera angle." And I was like, it's not new. I was like, I'm not trying to be old man yells at clouds, but go back and look at, like, stuff. They used to shoot it out of necessity, because I remember at the location that they filmed a lot of the world-class stuff at, there was an entrance. I'm sorry about hitting the mic. There was an entranceway right there. And that's where the camera sat on top of it. And it wasn't anything more than necessity. So they didn't have to spend more money, because this as well as I do, even if anybody hasn't seen the Iron Claw, the old man Von Erich, he did not like to spend money on stuff. He was, it was as little as you can to get the best product on the field. And that's why his family was the number one, because he didn't have to pay him as much.
No. The thing to say about Mickey is it was Mickey's idea to call the program World Class Championship Wrestling, because beforehand it was called Southwest Sports. Mm-hmm. That was the name of the show, Southwest Sports. Mickey's like, why don't we call it World Class Championship Wrestling? That makes it sound bigger than life. But the thing is, Fritz did not trust television people. So Mickey had to feed his ideas to Gary Hart. Gary Hart would feed the ideas to Fritz. Mickey, and it wasn't like Gary would like try and sabotage Mickey. Total opposite. He always gave Mickey all the credit. But at the time, he had to kind of like kayfabe it to Fritz that this was Mickey Grant's idea, and we're making a lot of money, and this little guy over here should be getting such praise from all the boys.
Like, yo, you got to cut homie in, because he keeps like letting us in on the stuff.
But the minute that Fritz heard that was a TV person's idea, not going to do it. We're shoot it down. And and every time I talked to Mickey would always tell me these world class stories, and how the Von Erich boys would have, like, there's this one story where I think it was like Kevin or Kerry, they grew marijuana on the ranch, and no one didn't know it until their dad found it, and their dad was like, "Who in the world planted devil's lettuce on my property?" And he burnt their crops. And how Mickey's telling this story, he's like, "It was one of the greatest tragedies those we've ever faced. Their marijuana supplies went out the door."
Oh man!
It's like, oh my god!
It has been. Yeah, it's amazing because it cycles things. Things are cyclical, clothing styles, music, everything is cyclical. And so we got to see a lot of that return to the vignette heavy stuff. And I think that because we have somebody in power on a mainstream program now who has a very heavy level of respect for things that happened outside of that company, we might see a little bit more of that coming back. We might see some involvement. I mean, like we talked about earlier with the Charlie Dempsey thing. He's already, you see somebody working outside of there. But so my last question to you for the evening, because I'd love to come back and do a part 2. I have to know about the Elvis impersonator thing.
Please invite me in anytime.
Yeah, we'll set something up and we'll do a part 2 of this interview. This has been a blast for me. My last question for the evening, though, is out of everything that has been pulled away from wrestling, what is something that you plan to bring back with CCW, with your brand? What is something that you're going to bring back? And I want to bring the Chaotic Combat up here. I want to keep this front of mind. We've got, the barbed wire logo, the Cerberus, the Roman Legionary.
That's such a cool artwork. Lars from Brutal Butcher Shop, way back in the days, created that logo for me, and I'm glad I found it because I'm like, I want to put this on T-shirts again and get it going. But,
what's something you want to bring back into the fold that's been missing, whether it's in your eyes or other people's eyes, and really put a stamp on it and say, this is CCW?
For me, the best way I could put what my plans are for our own little universe, and this isn't like one of those like just one thing type question, but I'll try to keep it as short as possible. What I want to do is showcase every wrestling style that's out there and give it proper due for what it is, and to showcase wrestling as a sport and to make it feel like the combat type feel. It's like, it's not combat. Chaotic Combat is not just because, they're going to do a death match or a hardcore match, whatever. It's also this guy has a legit martial arts background, or this person's a really good submission wrestler, but also the ways that we also filmed our shows cinematic like a movie, but we're also want to do things like backstage interviews. Now, of course, that's done on TV, but you don't see it as often on the independent wrestling scene.
Mm-hmm.
But we're also want to do kind of like the press conference style, where it is a build-up, roll sports like Phil, why someone's going to face off against their opponent. I want to bring back character videos, not just a promo, but I want to do the vignettes. I want to do the montage videos. I want to bring back things that, like, if I didn't know who you were, let's say your character, the Hoochie Daddy, right? If I never knew who you were, why do I want to be invested in you? But now if I see a video that shows this character and shows the real character, like, oh, this guy's at the trailer park, messing with these women, and he's driving a pickup truck, and he's over the top, and he's a bigger than life character. Well, now I'm interested because now I'm getting a taste of this character. Now I want to see him in action.
I'll give you an insight to the character when we get off screen because it's funny, but so in my mind, one of the greatest sets of vignettes that ever happened, and rest in peace, were the Tim White videos. And as like chaotic and tragic as those videos really were, they highlighted something that was missing at that time, and something that they also then brought back in the Matt Hardy trying to lose weight to make weight for the Cruiserweight Championship. That stuff's what gets me invested. Every week I knew I was going to sit down, I was going to look at SmackDown, and I was going to watch Matt Hardy try to get down into that, doing whatever he could. I knew Tim White was going to try to take himself out some other way. And like Tim White's a referee that I looked up to a lot because I always really enjoyed a lot of matches that Tim White called. But
an amazing human being on top of that.
You really saw it when they did the video package for him. That like that's a guy, and he was hired to be Andre's handler. I believe that wasn't he the gentleman that was to do that? He was
Andre's best friend.
He was another guy who was in that situation of like, hey, you're here, but you're going to learn this stuff. So I appreciate you doing that because storytelling is like the reason I fell in love with wrestling. I told you in a side conversation, my earliest memories of wrestling were the "Welcome to Minneapolis, Minnesota. It's WCW Monday Nitro," and the mall setting and everything. Like, that's my earliest memory of professional wrestling, is the first episode of Nitro. I love WCW. I fell in love with WCW. One of the worst things that WCW ever did was not do that, because they had fantastic characters and they really kind of like didn't work on that too much. And I wish they would have. So I appreciate you doing that, because to me, that's what invests. Like, I can sit my kid down and go, hey, watch this. This is who this person is. Instead, I watch like AEW, and it's not to knock on the product or anything, because like the in-ring quality is great. But like, I couldn't tell somebody who Nick Wayne was if I didn't like pay attention to Defy and the things up in the Pacific Northwest. I couldn't tell you that.
Some of the videos that we did for Chicagoland, we would do character videos, like Jackson P. Larkin. He's wearing this 3-piece suit walking down the south side of Chicago. Anybody been to the south side of Chicago knows that's like a tough neighborhood to come from. And he's from south side Chicago, so he's a tough guy. But he's walking like a mob boss. He's walking there with the diamond ring on his finger, gold watch. Like, he's daring someone to walk upon him. And he's walking down that aisle, but he's such a menacing big guy. But he's also a highly intelligent, intellectual person. So when he speaks, you want to listen to him, because that's intelligence in the hands of design of violence. On top of that, really made the character come to life. We had a guy who wrestles with us, the Ewok, who's a legit rapper. Like, he actually does underground rap concerts and stuff. And we it's like, dude, that's who you are. Play up to it. And he would do like music videos for us and stuff. And it's the song Dean Ambrose, which I'll send you, is a freaking awesome song. We would do when Eric Dillinger took on Chris Logan, Shogun. We had it where there's a video where Dillinger's in a gym and he's like doing the boxing bags and flipping tires and sledgehammer workouts. And then he had Shogun with his dojo training his wrestling students. And, he's that sensei badass, because that's what he is. And both guys are legit tough, believable, because now you got tough guy versus tough guy. And you got the training vignettes of them getting prepared to go to war with each other. We did things like that. Why? Because now that brings a big fight atmosphere. That brings a reason why you're seeing this and why that match should matter, because one guy's been an undefeated champion for 4 years. The other guy's the most hungriest up-and-comer who wants to make that challenge. I know I can beat him. Give me one opportunity. And I want to train harder than anyone else to get that chance. It's a Rocky story, And
everybody loves an underdog story.
And the thing is, after that match was over with, Eric Dillinger became super over with that crowd. Did he win? No. But there's actually victory and defeat. And that match made him like, because Chris Logan, once again, being smart, no one never kicked out of the super kick. Eric Dillinger took the super kick and dropped to one knee and got back up and flipped him off. Like, I'm still standing. He gets hit with another super kick, and then he gets hit with a brain buster to put him down finally. After the match is over with, Chris Logan just stares him down like, yep, no one else ever stood up to me, but you stood it. He went over there and picked him up and dusted him off and gave him that fist bump nod like, see you down the road, kid.
I mean, one of the best.
But instantly the crowd was instantly like, that dude's super over now because the champion just put him over. Even though the champion won, the way it was done, he's self-made.
We saw it this year. One of the best sets of storytelling was the Sami Zayn versus Roman Reigns. The underdog. You knew he wasn't going to win, but at the same time, like, you felt like he was going to win. Like, it was, and that's as over as somebody's going to get without winning. Like, you're Daniel Bryan WrestleMania 30, like those things. That's that level. And I think that it's even more important to do that on a small scale, because what you're doing is you're building these people. And to me, if I take my kid to a show, like I take her there and there's two women's wrestlers around here that are like heroes to her, Heather Blue and Ray Larson. And they are like, I got to take my daughter and sit her. There's a location that we used to go to shows or put on shows at. I did logistics for them. They had a bar and people would sit behind you and you would be able to sit down in this little carpeted area. table. There was no one sitting there. Usually kids would sit there. I happen to know that these girls weren't going to go out of the ring at all. And at least not in the sense of like going crazy and putting anybody in danger. So we sat very close to the ring. And one of the dearest things to my heart is Heather takes a powder out and she looks at my daughter and she goes thumbs up. And my daughter goes like this and she goes and like rolls back in. And I'm like, it's moments like that where like, this is like we have to get this generation of kids into this stuff. I'm at a house show 2 nights ago, and I've got these 2 little kids in front of me, and they're there with their dad. And I asked them where they're from. They're from Kalamazoo. We're in Detroit. He drove all that way with these 2 little kids because they wanted to see that stuff. And to me, that lifelong fans, these kids are losing it. It's a house show. They don't care what's happening. Bell goes off. 3, Kevin Owens wins against Solo Sikoa. These kids lose their mind. And I just looked ahead and I said, look, that's why I wanted to do this. I don't care about wins, losses, anything like that. I don't care about selling merch. I mean, merch sales and stuff like that will come. But to know that those kids' night got made, that's what I love. And that's indie wrestling has that option to do that, especially when indie wrestling starts to feel less like somebody just put this show together, and it's more, it has that care that you're bringing to it. And so like there's a level of appreciation from my end to you, because you get this on a show, I'm going to find ways to watch it, whether it's on the internet or I got to have somebody there, filming it. I want to watch this. Like I'm invested now. Now I want to see this. The belts are cool. The logo kicks ass. That you're wanting to bring in guys from Texas. Like I'm sold. You didn't need to sell me any more than a cool belt, truthfully. But I'm here for it. I want to watch this now.
The thing too that we do, I know we're gonna end this pretty soon, but another thing that I try to do with all my shows, anytime a fan buys a ticket online, I actually write thank you letters, personal thank you letters to each and every one of the fans. There was one time I actually wrote 400 thank you letters to all those people, and they weren't like the same old copy and paste. It was personal. Sit down and get to know them and talk to them. Another thing I do too, I actually show the fans to their seats. I do that personally on my own because I want to get to know those fans, each and every one of them. I want to get to know them, not like, oh, he's a fan. I get to know them by their names. I get to know their families, their kids, or if they're just a couple of guys out having a good time, wanting to have a couple of beers and watch someone get their butt kicked. Hey, cool. Hey, what's your name? Oh, I'm Brian, or I'm Dave, or whatever. Brian, Dave, nice to meet you guys. I'm John, the owner. Little things like that. We're a 3-piece suit, but still treat them like their family and friends. I've known them for 20 years. So the little connection that you build with the fans, that's what matters.
Because they'll come back time and time again, and it's a rule of business. And when you can put it to a product that somebody wants to watch, they'll come back forever, and then they become regulars.
The thing I do too, and something I also believe in, when the show's over with, I'll stand by the door. If I have flyers, I'll pass them out. If I don't have any shows coming up after that, I shake everyone's hand, thanking them for coming to the show, and see
and
they didn't like.
They're never going to forget it either. Even if they didn't enjoy something, it's an unforgettable moments because you made them feel important in that moment. And that's something that larger shows can't do because they don't have, it's very impersonal. And when it becomes an impersonal thing, it does really feel like a business. And what you're putting on is not just a business. It's not just a show, but it's a production. And very much in the theatrical world, that happens. Actors are out in the lobby after the show. They get their flowers. They'll come out. They'll talk to people. They'll shake hands. They'll take pictures, things like that. Wrestling is a play, and the stage, sure, is the ramp and the ring and things like that. But at the end of the day, it's a hardcore ballet. And I don't mean in like a hardcore match, but it's a very physically demanding ballet.
Very physically demanding sport.
It's sure, a bit of it's choreographed, but it's very impactful. I know that
you can't fake that ring when there's this small padding and the rest is plywood and metal you're landing on.
No give. Or thank goodness, and you end up with somebody who's got like 6x10 or 2x10s on it, and you're like, okay, this is better than the plywood. I would rather bump on a 6x10 ring or a wood plank ring than plywood any day. And everybody goes, why? Plywood's thinner. It's nice. No, it's not. No, it's not, because you can feel the steel through the plywood more. The wood you don't. So that is one of those amazing things to me, and I appreciate that you're willing to bring that into the wrestling realm. John, this has been absolutely fantastic. Normally my recording sessions go 2 hours on this, but when there's a good interview, there's a good interview. I'm going to ask you one thing, because this is something that comes to me from PK. He's my co-host on this show. He and I have created this together. We've been doing this for 2.5 years now, and we've loved every minute of it. But something he always asks everybody, he says, you're a professional wrestler, you're in the business, you're on the road. What's your favorite fast food? I'm not going to ask the other questions he asked because I don't like them, but what's your go-to meal? It doesn't even have to be from.
You can ask me all the questions too, the ones you don't like.
No, because I don't like them. I'm not going to give him the satisfaction of it. He's not here, so he doesn't get the satisfaction. But I'll give him I'll give him the food one. No, I'll give him the food one because everybody gets that question.
So growing up in the South, I would definitely say Waffle House was like. That's like every wrestler's hangout. Like after the end of a show, you're in the South. There was a wrestling event nearby. 2 places people go to: Cracker Barrel,
General, Waffle House. No, it was Cracker Barrel.
So sometimes too, yeah. I mean, you find that a lot too. But it was always Cracker Barrel or Waffle House, where everybody goes to. Man, that's a good question though. Like on the road, like.
Or it could be after a show. I mean, if you're stationed and you're as a promoter and you hit something up, it could be something like a Caesar salad.
I'll tell you a place that's near and dear to my heart, because the Bourbon Eagles Club has been a very special place to me. There's a little Mexican mom and pop restaurant next to the Bourbon Eagles. Like literally, here's the Eagles Club, and you just walk down the little sidewalk right in front of it. It's a little Mexican mom and pop right next door. That's some of the best food you ever have, and it's at like the cheapest prices you'll ever come across. Like $4 or $5, you have like 4 or 5 tacos, whatever you want. The Mexican Coca-Cola that's from Mexico, so it's got the cane sugar.
Hecho en Mexico.
Right. I always tell people if I could retire, I probably would live in Mexico. I probably would, because I speak Spanish. I love the Mexican people. I've encountered some of the most kindest, most genuine, most family oriented human beings you could ever meet. They understand the value of family. But also I love Lucha Libre, and the wrestling culture there is so respectful of wrestlers. Like people really value what professional wrestling is to them. It's part of their culture, I mean, name me another country that has outside of maybe like here in the Midwest, we got the Bruiser statue in Milwaukee, or not the Bruiser, the Crusher statue in Milwaukee. But in Mexico, there's multiple places with the El Santo statue. And they got like some of these buildings have murals of wrestling on it.
Well, lucha is one of those things that's transcended wrestling in itself. The masks.
It's a life culture.
Globally recognized. You can go. I would beg to bet you could go on 6 of the 7 continents and ask somebody if they know what this is, and just show them a mask. They don't have to know who it is, but they would know what it is, unless you're in the farthest outpost of it. We have an area here in Detroit that's called Southwest, and there's a place. It doesn't have a name. It's a garage. The guy's cooking food on a grate in it. You go in, beans $1, rice $1, 3 tacos for $5, $7. You walk out. You walk next door. You get a Jarritos Mandarin drink, and you're on your way. And love best. Jarritos. Yeah, it's the best. I had one today. It's fantastic. They're the best. That food is tamales. Are my like go-to when I'm in a hurry, because you can just grab them and go. And
real Mexican food is so amazing. Like that's another thing too. Like I know about my love for a country, if I could live there or not, is a lot of it based off of food and just like the culture itself. But the food alone is like, dude, I never get tired of like Mexican food. Like I could eat that every single day and never complain about it because I love it.
I had Taco Bell for lunch yesterday. I came home. My wife was making chicken tacos. I ate more tacos. It's not so. It's I'm just like,
it's taco every day, boys and girls.
Yeah, if it's it's to me, if the dish is based on rice, we're good. I don't eat sushi. Like I'll eat like a California roll if there's no fish in it or whatnot, seaweed and stuff. I like that. I like wasabi. I like seaweed. I like that. I just don't like fish itself. I've had bad experiences with shellfish and fish. So I don't eat it, but anything else rice-based, like I do Christmas Eve or Christmas Day, I'm going out to the Chinese restaurant and getting a double order of sesame chicken because I like it, and give me the pork fried rice. Game for all of that stuff. We talk a lot about food. So we're a wrestling podcast, basically in name only. We love talking about wrestling. We do the thing, but we also talk about video games, movies, pop culture things. Food's a big one,
and I love all that stuff too. I'm a nerd.
Yeah.
So I mean, if you're in wrestling, you kind of have to be kind of a geek in a way. I don't know how many guys think they're the big jock types. I played sports too, but I love D&D. I love
It's an inherently nerdy thing. Wrestling is not macho as it was back in the day. And so as we run up on it, there's one thing that I do like to do. I'm going to give you the big screen. I'm going to let you plug whatever you want to plug. You got as much time as you need, but I want to give you center stage to do what you need to do. So,
well, first and foremost, I'd like to give a huge shout out to everyone who's been a supporter of me. There's so many people. It almost feels like one of those Academy Awards with like the credits will start running, But I have a great group of guys and girls that have been my biggest supporters. That from day one, I'll never ever not stop thanking them for stuff. Bobby Blade, Aaron Rose, people like Toli Bertarelli, Ari Akuma, Davis Sarai, who's been a true friend to me. Skyday, we always call him Tio Jorge, Law Estrella from Dragon Gate, who's family to me, my wife and our other family members. My wife Coriander. Check out her books on Amazon. Keyshawn Demon Hunter. That's a really cool book series. Definitely highly recommend checking her work out. Moonsisters.org is her website for Sailor Moon fans. She's been featured in 2 film documentaries, actually, about anime. But there's so many people that the fans that continue to support professional wrestling. Without you, there wouldn't be us. So thank you. If you have a chance to check out Big Japan, BJW Core, that's bjwcore.com, is actually their subscription site. It's only $6.25 USD, give or take, because of the Japanese yen. Definitely check their stuff out. They have a really cool catalog dating back to 2016. But outside of that, you know what? Check out Chaotic Combat Wrestling, and we're on Facebook, we're on Instagram. Just type us up, and you'll come up, and give us a follow. Planning for some big shows coming up in 2024, and most importantly, I'm looking forward to talking to all of you in wrestling. So don't be a stranger. I try to be the most down-to-earth guy that anyone can talk to. I don't have an ego. I'm just a regular guy who had a chance to live the most charmed life for what I have. So if you have anything you want to pick my brain about, or you just want to have a great conversation, hit me up, and I'd be glad to talk to you. But most importantly, be good to each other, love each other, and life is short. Live your life, and don't have any regrets. So thank you.
Thank you so much. This has been fantastic. Like I said, we're going to schedule a part 2 because I got to know about the Elvis thing. It's my grandma's. My grandmas love Elvis, both of them, and I love making fun of them. I love doing that stuff and getting. Back when I drank a lot, I would just get drunk and sing Elvis songs, which is not good because, like I stated earlier, I can't sing.
I used to get the Elvis impersonator angry all the time. I say Roy Orbison was a better singer, and the guy's like, "Fine words, boy."
So with Roy Orbison, so Roy Orbison was there, and he did Pretty Woman, and then Van Halen did Pretty Woman. And no matter how many times I hear Van Halen's version, it doesn't get stuck in my head. If I hear the Roy Orbison version, 2 days later, I'm like, "Go away!" Like that's where I'm at with it. But once again, thank you so much, John. I'm going to get this up as soon as I possibly can. But this has been absolutely fantastic. Once again, Pro Wrestling Swiss Army Knife, everybody. John Bullard. Me, I'm the Hoochie Daddy Ethan James. You can find me at Hoochie Daddy EJ on Instagram. My brethren that's not here, Clinton, you can find him PK Batman. We are Where Did It Go? You can find us at Twitter, X, whatever you want to call it, On a Forklift Wrestling Podcast. We are On a Forklift Wrestling Podcast. You can find us at On a Forklift Wrestling Podcast on YouTube, Spotify, Apple Music, Google Podcasts, all that kind of stuff. I don't know where this one's going to end up. Definitely YouTube, probably Google Podcast too, because I think it uploads at the same exact time on there. And once again, John, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you.
And as always, we love you, Judy.